And as we go through our meetings today, we do ask that everyone keep your camera on if possible, just so that it can be, we can see you. And do remember, this is being broadcast through YouTube in a public forum. So that way the audience can see who's participating as well. Also remember that if you have questions for any of our presenters at any time, please raise your hand. Do not put them in the chat because, of course, again, this is a public meeting and it is being streamed to YouTube. And so any questions in the chat would not be able to be accessed by our public viewers. So we just want to be able to give everyone a chance to hear all the questions and the answers as well. We will do motions by roll call if that need arises as well. So I'm going to call roll to establish a quorum. Is that what I need to do, DeChà? Are we good?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So let me go back to my roll call. Okay, I'm going to do this by memory because I don't have a list in front of me. Is there any way I could get a list real quick?
Yep, just emailed it to you.
Thank you. Okay. Ed Cressley?
Here.
DeChà Reid?
Here.
Robert Marino?
Here. Sorry, I didn't get my mic on.
That's okay. Cecilia Jones?
Here.
Sheri
is now joining.
Stephen Peterson?
Here.
Jackie Adler?
Here.
Taven Sides?
Sorry, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Joseph Ruiz? I'll circle back. Thomas Ratliff?
Here.
Is now exiting.
Victoria Chen? Here. Millette Leafgreen?
Here.
Rochelle Garrett?
Here.
Joy Thomas?
Good morning, here.
Bridgette Ingram?
Here.
Dee Dee Gonzalez?
Here.
Holly Nolan?
Here.
Arnold Trejo?
Here.
Ben Boland?
Here.
Shauna Norton?
Here. Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
Jace, I'm going to butcher your last name. Are you here? Our student representative?
He will be joining us a little bit later.
Okay. Sal Ramirez?
Here.
And Gilbert Zavala?
Here.
Okay, thank you all very much for being here with us. We'll move on to throughout our agenda. Again, if you have questions, please just raise your hand and we'll recognize you and you can ask your question to our speakers. So the next item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes. All of you have received a copy of the minutes. Are there any questions or comments from the December 9th meeting? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. So at this point, I'll turn it over to DeChà Reid for our prior business.
Good morning again, everybody. It looks like from our last meeting, we did not have any prior business that I needed to go back and look at. So we can actually probably move on to the next agenda item.
Our next agenda item, we are going to have a presentation on the reskilling and upskilling. I don't know how many of your institutions are participating in this program, but we felt like this would be something that would be timely for us as we're in the middle of pursuing these grants and getting these grants offered to our students. As Dr. Ranis joined us.
I have indeed. Here I am.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sheri Ranis, Director of Workforce Education for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me here to present to you about the Texas Reskilling Support Fund Grant Program. Just to verify, is everyone seeing my full screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. I want to begin by introducing my colleague, Manny Garcia, who's a program specialist working on the Reskilling program. If any of you have been posing questions to us over the past year and 3 months or so, Manny has been your guy. He's been the fellow who's probably been responding to you the most frequently and sending along communications from the team. So I want to make sure that everyone has met him and is introduced to him. The Texas Reskilling Support Fund Grant Program was established in late winter 2020 and really launched in the beginning of 2021 when grants were dispersed to institutions. It stems from this a large allocation, $175 million, that was given to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to disperse from the Governor's Emergency Educational Relief Fund, known as GEAR. And you hear us talk about GEAR quite a lot. GEAR is that acronym. GEAR, in turn, comes from the CARES Act. So it is COVID-19 related federal funding that was put in a number of different buckets by a variety of different departments, Department of Education, Department of Labor. GEAR is a specific fund run by the Department of Education, dispersed to states, to their governors, and then the governors in turn disperse that funding. And so this program is funded by that source. The purpose, because of course it was emergency money coming at a time when the pandemic was really hitting hard, was to provide emergency support to students who were heavily impacted by COVID-19 pandemic, but more precisely to provide financial assistance to students in Texas who are pursuing credentials of value. And the goal was to cover student tuition and fees and cost of attendance. That is the purpose of the program. So again, the grants are focusing on a particular population or set of populations of students: displaced Texas workers who need to reskill or upskill to get back in the workforce, and Texas students who have stopped out of higher education institutions without completing a post-secondary credential. The idea was that the idea behind reskilling and upskilling is pretty fundamental. It's the idea that students need to equip themselves to be able to come back into the Texas economy, and that undoubtedly may require an upgrade in their skills or a change in their skill set to be able to fit into a very dynamic and actually complicated employment marketplace. Post-secondary degrees of different kinds are a means to do that. And so this is sort of the basics of the reskilling program so far. We've distributed $37.8 million in financial aid to public and private institutions in Texas. Since since early 21, we've had 3 rounds of competition, and we have a total of 82 grantees as of December 2021. We have grantees in every higher education region in Texas. We have 35 2-year institutions, 34-year institutions, and 2 health-related institutions. What I was about to mention before, and now I'm going to sort of really get very concrete about, is the kinds of students and the kinds of support in terms of re-enrolling and getting a credential, a post-secondary credential, and what this program was trying to do. It actually was, I think, in some ways rather path-breaking. There were 2 kinds of buckets of student credential programs that we are allowed to help students to be funded for. The first is high-value short-term workforce credential programs, and that includes credential programs that are below Certificate 1 level, which is actually very unusual. So credential programs that might be certifications or short-term low credit hour certificates, as long as they're convertible to credit or stackable to a credit-bearing program. So these very, very prescient, employment-related, skills-related kinds of programs are allowable under this program. Level 1, Level 2, and Level 3 certificates and advanced technology certificates as well. And the idea behind the high-value short-term workforce credential programs, these very short-term programs, is that they are of high value. And when we asked institutions to apply for this program, we asked them to give us their reasoning about why these programs were high value. We asked them to look at their target occupation list regionally. We asked them to look at wage rates and job employment prospects for their region. And we provided some support on that regard, which I'll talk about in a minute. But in addition, this program also over time has evolved, and currently it supports everything from associates through postdoctoral programs, as long as they represent high value. In our round 3, we added post-baccalaureate, master's, doctoral, and postdoctoral programs as being eligible, students in those programs for being eligible as well for support. Student eligibility for this program is a very particular, and this has to do with federal law as well as our governance of this through our state. This is a set. This set is actually quite determinative in a lot of ways. These students have to be Texas residents eligible for in-state tuition, and that definition of residency is determined by the institution. They must file a FAFSA, and actually it doesn't have to be an on-cycle FAFSA. It could be a FAFSA at any point during the year. They need to be Title IV eligible, technically anyway, but those who are enrolled in these very short-term programs we were just talking about, but who are otherwise Title IV eligible, are still able to receive funding. Students had to be impacted by COVID-19, and the institutions themselves establish how they make that determination about COVID-19 impact. They can be enrolled either part-time or full-time in a credential program, which I think is another kind of very interesting and not very common criteria for financial aid. And they have to be re-enrolling. That is, they were not enrolled in an institution the previous academic long semester or previous 6 months. These are the criteria for the students who are eligible. The student awards themselves are interesting too. We have instituted a middle dollar calculation that parcels out federal aid that students receive. So in other words, when looking at a student's eligibility, an institution can take into account state and institutional aid, but can set aside federal aid, add in this aid, and then put federal aid back in, so-called middle dollar calculation. And though this is primarily about tuition and fees, there's institutions can allocate a certain amount of money for cost of attendance, and that cost of attendance is determined by the institution. So up to $500 for cost of attendance, and as well, the institution can award up to $500 to eligible students who, without consideration of need. But awards should not exceed an eligible student's demonstrated financial need, and the awards are capped at most at a total of $2,500 per student per semester. There's some additional features to this program that are really interesting. First, grantees are allowed to spend up to 10% of their grant on marketing and outreach to students to make sure that students know about this opportunity. Students, administration, faculty, the marketplace of folks who you work with in your region. Grantees were asked to share, are asked to share their marketing and outreach plans with us. We have a new and really highly skilled communications team who are not approvers exactly, but are stand ready to provide input and support for institutions that want to go ahead and market and outreach this financial aid opportunity. This whole activity happening in that vortex of the pandemic was a really interesting moment. But one thing that we kept very top of mind was the opportunity to learn about how very fast turnaround emergency funding can and can't be dispersed, about what high value credentials are, and in that and what kinds of data, what kind of research is available to make decisions about what high value credentials are. With that, we worked with the Brookings Institution to develop something called the Texas Workforce Development Toolkit, which is a labor market information tool specifically for Texas and broken out by regions and municipalities. We provided a workshop specifically on the development toolkit with the Brookings folks for our grantees, and we found that many folks took advantage of this particular resource, which is still available. You can see it on this web location. And our grantee workshop efforts were actually kind of multiple. We did a series on outreach to adult students, marketing financial aid opportunities, and tips and tricks for managing federal grants. Tricks is not the right word. It's really tips and ways to keep top of mind some of the contingencies and requirements of federal grants. We have been getting periodic and interim grantee reporting about expenditures and about the students and programs that institutions have been supporting. And in particular, I mean, all of this is really important data, but in particular, the student level data is certainly going to provide us with a better understanding of what reskilling and upskilling populations look like and what credentials of value look like from the perspective of institutions around Texas. And because we have so many grants in all over the state, this is a really, it's a collection of data that we want to take full advantage of. I want to share with you some of the frequently asked questions that Manny and I get. We operate in a fashion where we encourage people to ask questions whenever they come up. And these are some of the ones that have been the most frequent. By the way, we end up speaking to folks in financial aid offices, but not just. We also end up talking to folks in student affairs, Office of Sponsored Programs. Anyone at a grantee institution who has a question about this program, basically we encourage them to ask us directly, and we respond as quickly as we can. But I guess first and foremost, there's this question about Title IV and satisfactory academic progress. And the answer to that one is that it's the institution at the institution's discretion to determine satisfactory academic progress and the way that is factored into their eligibility. That is consistent, as we understand it, with the way the federal folks look at Title IV and satisfactory academic progress. Another common question: can continuing education students receive aid? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. These short-term credentials are very often on the continuing education side of the house, particularly at community colleges. And yes, those students are definitely in the mix when it comes to whether or not they can get support through this program. Another common question, do non-credit students, like continuing education students, have to fill out a FAFSA in order to get funding? And the answer to that is yes, that is a stipulation. But as I mentioned before, that doesn't mean that students have to be on the calendar, the FAFSA, official FAFSA calendar. They can fill it out of cycle. But the idea is that that institutions will have documentation about their financial situation. And another very frequently asked question, are eligible students able to continue to receive aid following their first semester of funding? Absolutely. So once you've determined a student is eligible, and say you provided them spring 22 funding and they're still enrolled in summer and fall 22, you can fund them in summer and fall 22. So they can be continuing on through this, through the time period of this grant. This grant program ends September 30th, 2022. So that's some of the facts, ma'am and sir, about this program, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And let's see if we can stop sharing. And I also look forward to, Manny and I both are looking forward to a discussion by the committee, I believe it's a little later in the agenda, about this program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ranis. We do appreciate all the good information. We are going to have a discussion as a committee about how some schools are administering this program for those of you on the committee. But if you have any questions directly for Manny or Dr. Ranis, please let us know right now by raising your hand, and we'll recognize you for the questions. Okay, I have one question. Gilbert?
Yes, Dr. Ranis, I'm curious about the outcomes that you're tracking in terms of graduation from the program and whether those are leading to employment, those that are getting the credentials. Can you share a little bit more about when you would expect that an outcomes report is available?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. Well, we are tracking through the interim reports that are being submitted, student level data, which includes their demographics, the program that they're enrolled in, if they've graduated or not during the reporting period. And we should be able to wrap this up, the outcomes element of this up, we're hoping before the end of the year. But we won't, of course, capture everyone, because some folks will still be in progress of their credential program when the grant program ends on September 30th, but we'll be able to capture folks up through September 30th. And because of the THECB's ability to track students and track workforce outcomes, we'll be able to both look at graduation rates and employment outcomes, at least short-term immediate employment outcomes within a certain period of time. It's going to be a process, because at this point we're talking about thousands of students that are being supported through this program.
Thank you, Dr. Ranis.
Sure.
Looks like Rochelle, you have a question?
I do. I'm going to be real honest. My associate director handles most of the Reskilling grant program, so I'm not real familiar with it. But coming from a university, four-year university, it's been very difficult to find those students that qualify. I think now, I know there was some change last July, which allowed us to do a little bit more. I think it lowered the time frame that the student had to complete, and that did help us a little bit, but it's been a struggle to try to find students. We do the marketing, we've contacted the students, and then turns out we don't have a FAFSA on file, so then we're having to wait for the FAFSA, and then we're having to review it, and are they Title IV? Maybe some of them are bad SAP. So we hit roadblocks along the way. because of the time frame of everything.
Yes.
Even looking at those students that are, 50% complete or almost 50% to their degree, it's still hard to, if they've been out that long, we usually don't have a FAFSA. Like I said, it seems to be a struggle. There's roadblocks that we're having, and I don't know how, if you're seeing that result, or is the spending that you're having for the program more on the community college level? Because as a university, it's been extremely difficult for us.
Thank you for bringing that up. Part of the sort of built into the way this program was both set up and has been run, has been trying to be as responsive as we can to the kinds of issues that you've brought up. So we did, as you mentioned, a series of program modifications in July, and then we did another set in October. And that last set of modifications increased the number of institutions eligible for the program, the kind of student all the way through graduate school, but it also eliminated the requirement around near completion. So it's only a re-enrollment a requirement now. And we did this because of issues like you're bringing up, that institutions were finding it difficult to find the students that had all the appropriate requirements. And we responded by saying, as of September 1st last year, this is now just about re-enrolled students. It's a lot more students and a lot more programs, and a couple of private institutions joined in. I don't think that there's any distinction between performance between 2-year and 4-year institutions. Interestingly enough, there have been a number of universities done very, very, very well in their expenditure rates on this and finding students. Now, granted, the thing we've learned, I think we all, as a state, we've learned, is that capacity to identify students and to particularly re-enrollers or folks who are non-traditional age, I guess it would be, I like to call them returning adults rather than non-traditional age, but it is mixed. Not everyone has the same capacity to find and support those students. And that really hit home, I think, in the way we saw some institutions having difficulty getting the technical side of this together, the data and the computational side of it too, and then the financial aid calculation piece, which is its own important piece of work. So yeah, I appreciate your comments, and we saw that and responded to it. I'm hoping that the changes, the most recent changes will be helpful to you and your assistant director as you're proceeding to complete the grant.
Yeah, thank you. And I didn't know about the graduate school aspect of it too, graduate students. So that's good. Thank you.
Dee Dee?
And Dr. Ranis, isn't it correct that first-time graduate students are eligible as long as they've been out at least 6 months?
That's right.
Because that really expanded our eligible student pool.
Yeah, I mean, I might add, I know a number of you through our exchanges about this program in particular, and lovely to see you again, Dee Dee. Absolutely. I think that a couple of universities have really hit it out of the park on this, with the loosening of some of these criteria and the removal of some of the criteria. I thought we had one other question, but I'm not really sure now.
Rochelle, you still had your hand up. Did you have a follow-up question? Okay.
Okay. Thanks. And as I said, we're looking forward to your discussion because, again, our goal in this program, in the conditions and situation that we've all found ourselves in over the past 2 years, it's been intense. It's been complicated. It's been difficult. So hearing your thoughts about what can and can't be done, or what should or shouldn't be done, will be very, very helpful and instructive to us. So thanks in advance.
Thank you so much. Any other questions before we move on in the agenda? Thank you both for being with us today and shedding some light on this program. I know at our institution, we struggle as well. And so I look forward to our discussion this later on in our agenda. Okay, so we can move forward to the next agenda item. John, if you're on, I'll turn it over to John Wyatt, Senior Director, External Relations.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Getting some nods, so that's good. Good news. Good morning, John Wyatt, Senior Director for External Relations at the Coordinating Board. Here to present a bit of a legislative update, but to be honest, I don't have a tremendous amount to update on. In a lot of ways, we're kind of in the calm before the storm right now. As you know, primary elections were on Tuesday of this week, and so the legislature and policymakers have really been focused on their primary elections. However, now that those are, for the most part, behind us, we do expect things are going to start to turn toward an agenda for the next session. So what we'll see, first of all, we expect in the next couple of 2 to 3 weeks that the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker will issue their interim charges for committees. If you're not familiar, interim charges are specific policy areas that the leadership directs committees to look at in advance of the next session. And to potentially come up with recommendations for the legislature to consider in the next session. So those lists of interim charges will really kind of show us what areas leadership is focused on in terms of higher education and all other topics. And then during the course of the spring and the summer, the committees will meet in interim hearings to consider those charges. So what we're likely to see is the higher education committees, the appropriation of finance committees will meet on relevant charges. Our commissioner will be asked to testify at some of these hearings. Be in a posture of providing information and analysis to the legislature, so that they have the best information possible to make decisions of directions they might want to go on these policy issues. We also, usually what will happen is at the end of that process, each committee will issue an interim report. And that report will sort of collate the findings that the committees came up with during their interim hearings. And if they do have any recommendations for legislation or for items that the legislature might want to consider, those will be included in the interim report. So that's what we expect to kind of keep us busy for the next several weeks in advance of the session. There will be other things that we will have to consider. Our LAR we will have to develop that over the coming months. We have instructions on, what sort of conditions we might have in developing that LAR, but that's something obviously we'll be in communication with y'all on as we move forward. So. Yeah, aside of that, relatively quiet downtown, but I don't expect that to last.
John, I think you might have froze on our end. Well, at least he was in a nice froze Photoshop.
Right.
Well, I'll let him know that he's a little frozen on our end.
Okay. Thank you, DeChà.
Am I back? I can hear y'all.
Okay, now you're back.
Yes.
Is that its last stand after 2 years of Zoom calls? But I don't know. But if there were any questions or any more information I can provide, I'm happy to do so.
Does anyone have any questions for John at this point? Ed?
Yeah, John, just wondering, any perspective you can give on, I mean, you know, our current economic climate and everything else in the state. I mean, obviously, you know, the cost of living increases and all of that are realities, you know, that we're all facing and institutions are facing it. And so in light of that, you know, is there any, you know, kind of what is the tone of how, you know, to support students as well as, you know, universities in covering the additional costs, you know, setting of tuition and fees, as well as additional grant or appropriations, you know, to allow us to continue to provide the level of service and the excellent education when it's costing more to do that, you know, for everyone involved.
I don't have any particular feeling for how the legislature may be considering those issues. I mean, obviously, you know, this is something that impacts across the entire range of government in terms of increasing prices and how do we make sure, you know, that we're providing services to meet needs in light of those increasing prices. I mean, you know, the issue of, you know, how we make higher education affordable in this state, you know, is a perennial issue. So I do expect that that's something that the legislature is going to look at. And again, I expect we're going to see kind of get an inkling for what direction they're going in when we see those interim charges come out. Any other questions? So hopefully the next time we meet, I'll have a much more robust set of information to provide for y'all.
Thank you so much, John. We appreciate your updates as always and keeping us informed of what's going on down in Austin. Yep. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is an update from the coordinating board financial aid strategic priority with Charles Conterò-Puls, Assistant Commissioner. Has he joined us, DeChà?
I am here.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. So let me just get my presentation shared. Are you all able to see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So earlier, Sheri talked about some of the gear-funded work that's going on in the workforce education arena. And today I wanted to give you a brief update on some of the gear-funded work that's going on in the student financial aid programs area. I talked a bit about this at our last Financial Aid Advisory Committee, and my plan is to continue to provide you updates as this moves forward. One of the key pieces that we're working on is really thinking about financial aid within the realm of the overall agency's strategic architecture and the strategic plan for the state of Texas. And the agency has engaged in efforts over the past year to look at the 60 by 30 Tex strategic plan for higher education and to think about how to advance that. And, you know, really looking at the idea now of building a talent-strong Texas. And working to, you know, equitably foster the skills and spur the innovation that's vital to the Texas economy. Within our effort to achieve that, one of the specific strategic priorities within the agency is the idea of expanding access. And very specifically from the standpoint of leveraging financial aid to remove barriers to enrollment, to improve affordability, and to enhance value. And now that I'm looking at my slide, I realize I have it typed wrong because I'm redundant. I started with financial aid and ended with financial aid on that sentence. Oops, sorry. So a piece that we're looking at internally is to develop our strategic approach to the expand access strategic priority, and to think about kind of what are the main drivers that we want to use in our effort to leverage financial aid. So we've been having some agency discussions over the past several months to really think about, where are the key places that we might be able to leverage things. And a lot of that is focusing now around kind of three main areas that we're thinking about. One being program design. How are financial aid programs designed? What are pieces of them that could be improved? How could roadblocks be removed? As well as what do we need to be thinking about in terms of new opportunities? And the GEAR funding over the past year and a half to 2 years has provided us with opportunities to try different things, as opposed to having statute passed and funds appropriated for a specific program. The GEAR funding has allowed us to do things in the realm of emergency educational grants, reskilling and upskilling. I'll talk in a minute about transfer grants. There's also been a Texas Leadership Scholars Initiative, a number of different ways to try different things. So program design is a key thing that we're looking at. We're also looking at what we call intentional engagement, or how do we engage with individuals to make sure that they understand the financial aid that's available to them, to help remove their roadblocks to enrolling in higher education. And with that, a key piece we're looking at is how does that work that we're thinking about in relation to expanding access tie in to other work going on in the agency that's really focused on the career and college advising component. And we want to make sure that we don't end up kind of building two silos. We don't want to build a whole advising strategy around financial aid while a whole other strategy is built around college and career advising, and have those two strategies competing against each other. Instead, we want to make sure that we figure out how best to inform the college and career advising work to be able to include financial aid within that, because, college and career advising, we can advise students, all we want about going to college, but if they can't afford to pay for it, that advising doesn't achieve the outcome. So a lot of thought going on as to how do we make sure that we approach this from the multiple strategies going on with the agency working together, as opposed to in their own streams. And then we're also looking at technological infrastructure and how do we improve the way that we're able to administer financial aid to the benefit of institutions, to the benefit of students, et cetera. And so I'll talk a bit more about the technological infrastructure as well. I mentioned in the last meeting that we're approaching all of this really from the idea of an agency-wide perspective. And that, I think I mentioned last time as well, that that's a bit of a new approach for us. Financial aid has often been thought of as kind of in the realm of student financial aid programs. So, in the realm of, the team that DeChà and I lead to, administer this, and really needing to think about how does this relate to the entire agency. I mentioned the different initiatives that are going on, and college and career advising is happening in the division of college readiness and success. The reskilling and upskilling is happening in the division of workforce education. The Texas Leadership Scholars, that happens within the academic affairs and workforce education area. So things happen throughout the agency, and we're really working to think about how do we thread those things together more effectively so that whenever there are financial aid initiatives going on, regardless of where they're occurring in the agency, they still are grounded in this idea of expanding access by leveraging financial aid. So that's a key piece that we've been thinking about. In terms of next steps, we've kind of wrapped up some initial work on thinking about where we're going with this, and we're going to kick off some work on tackling more discussions and engaging more stakeholders in those discussions. So starting to broaden the group that are discussing these types of things, and thinking about, coming up with a plan for, what do we want to accomplish within this realm within the coming, 15, 18 months. The work that we're doing right now is very much on developing the strategy, as opposed to executing specific change. So, the work that we're doing isn't about, trying to write the specifics of, we're going to change, we want to propose changing this program statute to mean, this instead of that. But more the effort to engage the discussion to identify kind of a broad concept and a broad package of what we're looking at so that it can really guide all of our efforts in the future, while other activities, focus on some very specific items. So more to come on that as we work to engage more stakeholders in the discussions. But it's been a very interesting set of conversations going on, and discovering how financial aid touches all of the agency, but we haven't really thought of it that way before. So it's been exciting to kind of see this come together with the idea of it being an agency-wide initiative, and really thinking about developing an overarching strategy of what we're doing to help guide then individual efforts. Another piece that we've been working on is a randomized control trial, and that is with the transfer grant program. And the transfer grant is funded through the GEAR funds, and it gave us this opportunity to pilot some novel and innovative approaches to providing financial support to critical populations. So as we've approached this from the idea of working to try some different things that not necessarily are designed exactly how they would be designed if they become long-term programs, but more what are the kind of things that we can try, quite frankly, because they aren't long-term programs, because they are short-term funded programs through these GEAR resources to help inform things we might want to think about. And so the Texas Transfer Grant is looking specifically at providing portable need-based aid to high-achieving transfer students who are low income. And portable being something that typically we haven't done at the agency. Texas is a very decentralized state. Most all of our financial aid programs provide block grants to institutions that institutions can then use the guidance that exists in statute, rule, and our guidelines to then identify the selected recipients. Whereas this program, the agency will actually be using the information that it has in its systems through the FAFSAs we receive, the financial aid database submissions that you all do, the other CBM reporting that is done regarding enrollment and all of those pieces. There's quite a number of those reports to identify a population of students that are in the two-year sector right now, to provide them with $5,000 grants to help support their transfer to the four-year sector in the fall. And so this kind of the mantra of this entire effort, as we've worked with MDRC, which is our the organization that we've contracted with to help us administer this randomized control trial, and they're doing all of the research component of this. But our mantra has basically been, we've never done it this way before. We haven't done this idea of a centralized program. We're simultaneously trying to build technology to support this, so that when it comes time for institutions to have to certify that these students are enrolled, that there'll be technology in place to help you all do this. This is a smaller size program, and so we're looking at the idea that four-year institutions and HRIs might likely have hundreds as opposed to thousands of students that are out receiving, and maybe not even that large, depending on how many students take up the notice. We are in the midst of getting ready to send out interagency contracts to all of the four-year institutions and HRIs, the public four-year institutions and HRIs, along with some explanatory webinars. Our goal has been very much focused on making this as easily administrable, if that's a word, for you all as possible. And so what we're going to be working on is providing rosters of once students are selected. We'll look into our system and see, has that student either submitted an Apply Texas application listing one of the eligible institutions, or have they listed one of the eligible institutions on a FAFSA for the coming year? And if either of those things have happened, we'll put that onto the roster so that the institution can know that the student is going to receive this funding, so that you can build it into their financial aid packages. To start with, those rosters are going to be pushed out through the Move It system. Our goal is this summer to transfer to this technology that we're building, so that you'll just be able to go into, log into that system to get rosters whenever you need them. And then the certification process will occur online in this new system, and it'll be a two-step piece. One at the beginning of the semester for institutions to just indicate whether individuals on their roster have registered at their institution. And quite frankly, that step is from a kind of funding projection standpoint. This is a one-time grant with federal funds. We really don't know the amount of students that are going to accept what we're offering to them. And so we want to get a heads up of how much money might be expended through this program early on. And then there'll be an actual request for payment. And that you'll go in and just indicate to us the students on your roster who are enrolled at least 3/4 time as of the census date. And so we're not looking for you to have to do any kind of financial aid need or financial need calculations or any kind of SAP calculations or having to check residency or any of those kind of things. We're really just going to be looking for you to let us know this is, here are the people who are enrolled at least 3/4 time as of census date, so that we can send you funds for those students. More to come on that as we continue to build this, and we're hoping to have those rosters out by the end of the month, so that you can have those available for thinking about the fall semester. But we're still working through all those details, wanting to make sure that, we've got because it's federal money, we do have to have the interagency contract with you all. We can't just run it through the program participation agreements. We could do that if that was appropriated state funds, but the federal money has some other pieces of the puzzle that we have to include. And then finally, I wanted to mention the technology. I've mentioned before, I think I started mentioning it all the way back at the last TASFA conference, and I've been continuing to mention that we really are focused on trying to build some technology that provides better support for our financial aid programs. We are wanting to make it so that we're able to respond to new ideas more effectively. We want to make it so that it's easier for you all to just go to one place for all our programs. We are very aware that, if you're trying to do funds for Texas Grant, TEG, or TEOG, you go one place. And if you have to do something for bilingual scholarship, you have to go to another place. And, if you have to do Texas Work Study Mentorship Program, you have to go to another place. And trying to pull all of that together, and really thinking about it from these kind of goals that we are thinking about: stakeholders, re-engineering, flexible, adaptable. We want to think about, how do we support institutions and students best through what we're building, and how do we challenge our conventional thinking? How do we not just recreate what we currently have in a new environment, but how do we take advantage of what technology might be able to do to make things easier for everyone along the way? It really, this part of the gear-funded initiative came out of the discussions we had internally that it's very difficult for us to bring up new, novel, innovative approaches to financial aid because it takes us so long to get things ready for institutions to be able to report to us. And so we want to try to get into an environment that allows us to configure new programs quickly and to be able to bring things up. And if all works well, have it in ways that then can support the agency throughout. Right now it's very focused on the things we administer in student financial aid programs. But as I mentioned, financial aid occurs throughout the agency. And so our ability for everyone to be able to use this. So our goal is to go live this summer with the platform for the transfer grants certifications and payments, as well as for our peace officer loan repayment program. And both of those will then serve as the foundations to bring in over a dozen additional programs into the platform over time, so that eventually all of the programs that we administer, other than the college access loan, would be on this platform. So that's where we're going right now with the gear-funded initiatives, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of those aspects.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Ed?
Yeah, Charles, just struck by a phrase or term that you use, leveraging financial aid. And again, I'm trying to give context of that, and I think you did give some context in explaining what that meant. In comparison to that term being used, I think, within higher education with the idea of strategic enrollment management. Another term used when I hear leveraging financial aid, maximizing tuition revenue. Another term that comes to mind when I hear leveraging financial aid is responding to willingness to pay versus ability to pay. So I guess I'm just trying to get my head around, the state using leveraging financial aid and assuring there's an understanding of the definition that is behind that, especially in the area of ability to pay, and is there a rethinking of either the priority is not on students who have limited resources and trying to respond to ability to pay, or a redefining of how we determine what ability to pay is. So I'm kind of reacting to a phrase and just, I guess, any thoughts about will this be understood depending on who that phrase is being shared with as to what these strategic priorities are for the state?
Sure. Well, and that's, I think, part of why we've tried to embed the concepts of what we mean in the information, because this is definitely not what you've described of kind of leveraging from an enrollment management and maximizing tuition, et cetera. We're really thinking about how, we use the word leverage because we don't have an endless pot of money to support every single need that exists. We know that there are limited resources. And so we want to think about, given that there are limited resources, how can we best leverage those resources? How can we target those resources to have the greatest impact? From a concept of expanding access, our focus is on that idea of expanding access. How do we help ensure that the barriers that might be in place, specifically financial barriers, how do we best remove those in order to allow a broader set of individuals to achieve the benefits of higher education? Improving affordability and thinking about, that piece of how can we use the financial aid in ways that allow the student to get the greatest value from their education. And at the last board meeting, the board approved some adjustments in the language for the targets that we look at when it comes to thinking about student debt. In the 60 by 30 text plan, it had been specifically focused on the goal of the students graduating with an average debt that was less than 60% of the average income. I'm getting it wrong. I apologize. I didn't think I was going down this road with this discussion. I don't have those pieces right in front of me. But the idea has very much adjusted itself to think about the fact that debt is a long-term item, and the benefit of higher education is an even longer-term item. And thinking about debt from the standpoint of a student's ability to be able to reasonably pay off their student loans in over a 10-year period, based on the career that they're pursuing or the education that they pursued. And so that's a different way of thinking about it, as opposed to kind of thinking of a moment in time. We're going to take all these graduates and we're going to calculate how much they borrowed and compare it to, first year wages. It's really thinking about the fact that this is, the debt piece isn't solved by a student 1 year after graduation, and we need to think about that. And we really want to, overall as an agency, there's a focus on the idea of high value credentials and really helping students translate their education into the workforce. Thinking about the different transitions that occur. Individuals move from high school into higher education. They move from higher education into the workforce, and those things may move back and forth. It's not just a straightforward path. There might be into the workforce, back into higher education, back into the workforce. And we want to make those transitions valuable transitions. And so thinking from that standpoint of how do we leverage financial aid so that we can remove the barrier for a student to enter higher education, as well as preparing them to succeed after higher education in their ability to receive the benefit of their education. And so, the ideal is graduating with no debt. That would be, that's a great piece, but also even manageable debt, that individuals can succeed in repaying. And so that's really the framework that we're thinking around. We're not thinking around, like you mentioned, things like maximizing tuition revenue and those types of pieces. That is not the realm we're in. We're thinking of it from the state perspective of the state investment in financial aid, and how can we leverage and target those funds to be able to have the greatest impact within the limitations of the funding that exists. I don't know if that helps clear it up. I'm guessing some of you are probably wanting me to say, and here's exactly how we're going to do that. And we don't have that at this point. It's more that we're having the discussions to really think about where do we want to go with this? And if there are new initiatives in the future, how do we assess those initiatives from a strategic plan around financial aid, rather than kind of assessing initiatives from each individual initiative's standpoint. And so that's part of what we're really trying to build is, what are we trying to achieve? What is the big picture of what we want to see happen when we utilize state funds to provide financial aid? And, if we can have that, it can put us in a better place to then think about individual ideas that come up. But I'll acknowledge that a lot of that in the past has been kind of assessing each idea individually as opposed to assessing from a broad strategy.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it's just that context that I know I always find myself when I use a phrase, am I defining it for the context? Because if not, it can be interpreted other ways. And, what you've done, I think, is a great job to say, what does, leveraging financial aid mean in this context? So appreciate that.
Great. Any other questions I could answer?
Thank you so much, Charles. We appreciate the great information, and we appreciate the direction that you guys are looking at and taking into consideration the financial aid component for our students. So thank you again for being with us today, and we appreciate your comments.
Always a pleasure to see everybody. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you. Our next agenda item, we have Shannon Crossland. She is the commission chair for Certified Financial Aid Administrator Program for the NASFA organization. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about what that actually means and how to become one. Shannon, are you with us today?
Hi, good morning, friends. Thank you for the agenda adjustment. Can you hear me okay? See my slides?
Yes.
We are good to go. Good morning, friends. Thank you, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, Madam Chair Denise, the Financial Aid Advisory Committee, and those watching and tuning in for the invitation to share my story and discuss the Certified Financial Aid Administrator Program. My name is Shannon Crossland. I am the Director of Student Financial Services at Frank Phillips College, and I serve as your CFAA Commission Chair. This little poll, for those of you that know about the certification process, you are in one of these phases of the process. You either haven't applied yet, you're interested, you've applied, but you still haven't purchased that exam, or you purchased the exam, or you are an FAAC. So you are in one of those phases. For those of you that do not know about this certification program, I hope by the end of our conversation today that one of these boxes will be checked for you. And I'm hoping it's the first one. You're interested in learning more. And I hope that we can help you with that today. The CFAA program benefits us as individuals, and it truly benefits our profession. It sets the standard for what it means to be qualified to administer the federal financial aid programs. The foundation for our program is built upon three principles. We have the knowledge and the experience that we've gained as financial aid administrators to show and to take that knowledge and experience and show that on the knowledge exam. The third part of that is our affirmation of our integrity and our continued commitment to ethical behavior. The mission of our certification is to enhance the future of the financial aid community by inspiring quality job performance, encouraging continuous learning, and promoting professional development among financial aid administrators. And honestly, we believe the program is already fulfilling its mission. On a side note, at the first part of the month at the NASFA Leadership and Legislative Expo, we had a forum track specifically for FAACs. It was our inaugural forum, and we believe we have checked all the boxes of our foundations and our mission and look forward to continuing that annually. Our program is about community. That's the thing that we embed in everything that we talk about when we talk about our program. The program was created with the help of some of you that I've seen on the Teams meeting. We've had subject matter experts come in, a plethora of volunteers who work at different types of colleges, universities across the country, and represent our entire financial aid community. Volunteers who already have the certification help us respond to psychometric analysis of how the test is performing for all the candidates. We look at the pass-fail, we look at the questions. They help us to sustain the program through regular review and periodic updates. And it also helps us keep up with the regulatory changes so that we can reflect that in the knowledge base exam. Then we have our other group of volunteers that serve on our program commission. And our goal is to provide guidance and oversight of the program. Our 21-22 commission is shown for you on the slide. We convened for the first time back in January of 2019. We have limited terms of service to ensure that new representation every year we keep that cycle going. I'm proud to announce that starting July the 1st, Christina from Glendale Community College will be taking over as chair, and Craig from Kenyon College has been elected as our chair-elect. So those are our representatives. We have a representative from all of the regions. We have representative at large. Lindsay Brigman from Grantham University, she is a chancellor at her school, so she's been very valuable in the knowledge that she has brought to the table for us. And then Todd, our public representative, we have one public representative that brings in that certification piece, how we can, for recertification and how we can keep our program set to the standards that it needs to be recognized. All of these will be changing July the 1st. But that's our current commission, and I can't brag about each and every one of them enough. I've learned so much from them. We have spent many, many days in Google Documents on meetings trying to ensure that this program is to the highest standard that it can possibly be. Thinking about the program design and development, I want to just touch a little bit on the background on how we developed this program and the involvement of the financial aid community. This started way back in 2018 as a board initiative. The NASFA board took the courageous step and began this development and implementation. That's something that I know that all of us have talked about for a very long time. We go to college. There's not a major for financial aid, so we needed that piece. It's just been a topic of conversation for a very long time. So NASFA committed to creating a thoroughly researched, community-based accreditation program. And if you'll notice, community is going to be mentioned a lot. That's our interwoven theme throughout our program. The program was designed, we had input from practitioners at colleges and universities from across the country. For the knowledge exam, we had subject matter experts come together to define what a financial aid administrator with 5 years of experience should know. We spent months and months and months working on that portion. We would edit, re-edit, redo. And the reason we spent so much time on it is because we wanted to set the standard to define the scope of the knowledge exam. From that, we brought in another group of highly qualified volunteers to help write the exam and then evaluate it. That took quite a while in itself. Then we had more representatives come in to take the knowledge exam, like a beta test. We needed to establish the metrics, like the pass point and stuff. So we beta tested it so that we could see if all the work and the research that we had done was setting that standard and defining the scope of our exam. We wanted to ensure that it appropriately served the needs of our financial aid community. So we did spend, as you can see, we worked a few years on this, a lot of reviewing and editing and testing to make it a good standard for all of us. Well, all our hard work paid off, and in April of last year, nearly 2 years after the launch, our program became accredited. There was, and I was not involved in any of this. This was all part of our NASFA staff that helped us with this for this program. But that we met all of the qualifications for the Credentialing Quality Standards, CQS, of accreditation, both in operations and psychometrics. And what this does is this just addresses the quality of our certification program. And that was a huge step for us because the outcome of this is a testimony to the work and dedication of each and every one of you, all of our financial aid professionals who contributed to the development of this program and to the maintenance of this program and to what you do every day for our students and families. So thank all of you, because you're the one that truly made this happen for us. How did I get involved in this program? I began way back when it first started in 2018. I served on the Job Task Analysis Task Force. And within that, our purpose and our charge was to identify core competencies for financial aid professionals. Those main areas that we, to set that standard for the knowledge base. We had about a dozen volunteers across the country, and we worked hours and hours, and we developed a comprehensive list of tasks and knowledge required of proficient financial aid administrators in a broad perspective on the role, like the big picture, not the details, but the big picture, within all of our institutions. After that, I then served on the initial CFAA commission as a commissioner at large when we first kicked that off, and that was a treat to work with those individuals and learn and grow from them and actually be a part of that kickoff for our program. Let's think of the big picture. Talking about the big picture, let's put the program into its larger context. Our program builds upon the foundation of the work that you already do as a financial aid administrator, whether you're a director, whether you're a processor, whether you're an advisor, it builds on that foundation. Once you start in financial aid, you are starting to accumulate knowledge and experience that nobody else has. You're creating that foundation. And you receive support, through the coordinating board. You receive support through your associations, through conferences and workshops and training events and conversations such as these, and then mentoring. You're learning something every day. I can't tell you. I have several of you on this meeting have been mentors to me, and I've learned a lot from you, and that just builds that foundation. So think of it as you're just building upon that. So don't think of it as an exam or a test, but think of it as a building upon your foundation. There are several pathways to becoming a leader in financial aid and an subject matter expert. And the FAAC designation is just that one step on your pathway to really let people know, hey, I have this foundation and I've made the initiative to make this happen. But you get to decide that. You get to decide your path and what that's going to look like and how you're going to do that. And the bonus is, you get that recognition for all the work that you've done, what you've learned as you go, and just kind of a, something that sets you apart from others. Now, let's keep in mind that just because you have FAAC doesn't mean that you're a financial aid expert. It's just part of your journey. But based on the knowledge content and the foundation that you've already built, and as I said, I know most of you are experts already. So it's not saying that you're an expert, you just have the knowledge for that. Part of the journey is going to be continuing education. It's going to keep us up to speed on what's going on. And then that gets into the recertification requirements, which we'll get into detail in a few more slides. All right, so, all of you, you deserve the recognition and you've earned it. So your initial process is pretty straightforward. There are certain qualifying criteria that our commission has established, which I will go over those here in just a few slides. Once you're confirmed and you're eligible, you're going to apply online to sit for the knowledge exam. Then you'll need to take and pass the exam. Now, one bonus about this is that once you take the exam, as long as you keep up with your recertification requirements and don't let your designation expire, you will never, ever, ever have to take that exam again. So that's the bonus of a test. When we talk about exams, I know that that's kind of I see people's eyes get really big and I get some really funny faces, but I always throw that in there just one time. You know, that's the kicker there. So let's talk about each of these steps a little bit more in detail. So we have a tool on the website, and then I believe in your slides you have reference to all of these links. If not, I'll get those to you. So you're going to go through this tool to see if you meet the initial eligibility requirements. The tool is free of charge. It's completely anonymous, requires no commitment. You do not have to be a member of NASFA to use this tool. Now, I should have said this earlier. You don't have to be a member of NASFA to become an FAAC. This does not require a NASFA membership. So keep that in mind. If you don't meet the eligibility requirement, the tool will automatically provide feedback for you on what you need to be able to qualify to sit for this exam. For example, you may need more years of experience, or you may need to earn additional professional credentials. That tool will assist you in that and provide you a feedback printout to help you stay on track so you can sit for this exam. Eligibility requirements: hold a bachelor's degree or higher. For the professional experience and knowledge, we require 5 years. However, we have some stipulations in there. If you have at least 7 NASFA credentials, you are eligible with 3 years experience. Or if you have 1 year experience and you have at least 12 NASFA credentials, you're eligible. And you must also attest to uphold NASFA's Code of Conduct and Statement of Ethical Principles. So we've gone through the eligibility checks. Now, we're ready to apply. The great web developers at NASFA have created this dashboard for our program and for FAACs. The tool tracks the progress throughout the program, and it's the main landing page. It tracks your application, it tracks all your recertification points. It's where you would purchase your exam. And then when it's time for you to reapply for recertification, it will notify you. For example, my recertification expires June the 12th of this year. And so every time I log onto my dashboard, I have a note that it's time for me to reapply, and I need to do that. So I do not have to take that exam again, right? So this dashboard, and the link is here, and I believe that's provided for you. So for the application process, if you are a member of NASFA, which you do not have to be, your information will auto-populate. If you're not a member of NASFA, you will fill this information in. You will need to upload a PDF of your resume, so be sure to have that ready. And then it'll ask you some different, you'll have to adhere to the Code of Conduct, put in your experience, etc. Once approved, then you will get a link to purchase and schedule the exam for the next testing window. I know if you'll see on today's news, the testing windows are announced. So keep an eye on that. That way you can schedule that appropriately. So we've applied, we're getting ready for the exam. Let's talk about the exam. The exam is closed book, multiple choice, and it's administered online using remote proctors. You can take the exam in your office, at home, as long as you meet the technical requirements. All of these technical requirements and information on the remote proctoring is detailed, very detailed for you in this candidate handbook. It's your go-to resource. It includes the exam content outline, which breaks it down into the different areas and provides you a scope of the questions you'll be presented with. It also has a great resource list for you where you can refer back to and look at that. You have 2 hours to take the test. There are approximately 115 multiple choice questions. And again, there's multiple testing windows. With the remote proctoring, it's not 8 to 5. You can take it, if you want to take it at 1 in the morning, if that's when you're at your top of your game, you can take it then. If you want to take it at, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, that's up to you. You drive the ship on that. The exam, I talked about the exam content outline. These are essential competencies that are measured within these 12 different topics. And when we were building this back in 2018, these are the topics that we felt covered a financial aid professional. Again, this is all outlined in the candidate handbook. So, for example, you have the data management range is 4 to 8%, while student eligibility is 9 to 13%. You'll expect to see more questions about student eligibility than data management. So that'll help you focus on where you need to prepare. If you are not really honed in on cash management, but cost of attendance inside and out, you can look at that range and say, I better review cost of attendance, but I really need to hone in on cash management. That'll help you kind of gauge that, or administrative capability. That's a pretty high number there. Or student eligibility. That'll help you hone in on what you need to focus on for your preparation. We have a list of core resources within the handbook as well, and encourage you to use these as you prepare. These materials have been produced by the Department of Ed, including the FSA handbook, self-study guides, but you have the flexibility to do what you want to do on that. If you want to look up the regs and read it from the regs in the handbook, then the new FSA partner, the Knowledge Center, that's a big one. The Student Aid Index is big. NASFAS regs. And I know most of you, and you know me, so I looked at everyone and made sure I had it all I's dotted and T's crossed on that for each content area. I want to talk to you a little bit about how I prepared for this exam. We did not have a handbook. That was created later once we started the program, but we did have the content outline. The same content areas that are in your handbook, those 12 areas. So I created a working document. I went through each content area and I expanded on those competencies and what I needed for Title IV administration. I noted the reference materials, the FSA handbook, the CFR, the Higher Education Act. That's when I said I would go to NASREGs. I would go to the Student Aid Index. I reviewed study guides from the credential tests that I had earned. I went back and I would take those practice quizzes on those sections from the credentials that I learned. So I dedicated time to review and prepare. I would schedule appointments with myself, and that helped me be accountable to prepare for the exam. I have test anxiety, and so when it comes to multiple choice, I question myself a lot. I can write essays all day, but when it comes to multiple choice, I question myself a lot. So I really did that in my preparation, and I scheduled appointments with myself over each of the content. For example, I would schedule an hour on a Tuesday to review cash management, and an hour on Thursday to review student eligibility, and I would look at those and I would ask myself questions and prepare that way. That's just one way. Everyone has their own way, but wanted to share with you how I prepared for the exam. Again, the candidate handbook is complimentary to you. You can download that from the NASFA certification website at nasfa.org/certification. You can download that, and that gives you everything you need to know. Our exam preparation guide, if you are interested in taking this exam, this is complimentary until June the 30th, so it'll be right there in your resources. So download it now, and that'll help you with your preparation. Now, through the regional associations, they have self-assessment worksheets and, starting that preparation facilitator guide. And then we have a social media toolkit that we use to provide information on the handbook and preparing for the exam. So go out and get your handbook, and do get your exam preparation guide, because that is complimentary until June the 30th. I talk a lot about the credential exams and how I use that to prepare. The credentials are helpful for you to earn recognition for mastering certain topics. It's very in-depth. And when you think about the FAAC exam, it's an overview of all that. You're not going to go into the minutia. We have 16 topics, multiple choice questions, great way for you to prepare. I would go through these in the guides and do the quizzes, and I would set a clock in front of me and do those quizzes, so that would help my test anxiety when I went to take the exam, the knowledge-based exam. And several of you have participated, I know, through TASFA with their training, their regional training that's upcoming here this month. They're doing an authorized event. I believe it's verification. So that's one way you can earn your credentials there. Talk a little bit about the remote proctoring. It's very flexible. You can take the exam from anywhere. You don't have to go to a proctoring center or a testing center. You will be given specific details about what you need to do to prepare for this exam. And then NASFA decided to go with this. Number one, for the security for the exam, and for the cost, the reduced cost, that doesn't cost an extra charge for participants. And then again, that flexibility. Now, for the remote proctoring, I decided to do mine in my office at my previous institution, and I did it on a Sunday when I knew no one would be there. You need to make sure that you have your desks cleaned off. You can't have any paper, anything on your desks. You need to make sure your internet is working correctly, that you have they recommend that you be hardwired in, not to have any freeze ups or issues. You cannot have your cell phone. You do have to show your driver's license. A remote proctor will come on. You will show your driver's license, and they will verify your identity. And this goes into tremendous detail in the handbook, but if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to go over that with you, that experience. We did develop a customized letter. If you are interested in pursuing the designation, if you would like your leadership to support you in this, in your participation. And then also, once you earn your designation and are ready to recertify, we also have a letter prepared for that, for your leadership support in that if you need that. Talk a lot about recertification. So you do not have to take that exam again. We don't want to take the exam again. So we want to keep our recertification current. You recertify every 3 years. Now, this is a very important phase of the program because it demonstrates that you are keeping your knowledge up to date. You're engaging in activities. You're engaging in your associations. You're engaging in webinars. You're supporting your professional development and your personal growth as a financial aid administrator. So you want to keep that in mind. You must earn at least 60 recertification points during that 3 years to be eligible to recertify. And they will keep you posted how many points you have, when's your certification. That will all be on your dashboard. You can earn points by, for those of you that have presented at this meeting, you could possibly earn points here. If you do webinars with any of your associations, any type of trainings you participate in or attend, step out of your comfort zone. I encourage you to do this. I did. And I wrote a book review. That was one of the activities where you could earn recertification points. So I stepped outside of my comfort zone. So I challenge each of you to look at those activities and step out of your comfort zone. You might surprise yourself. I did, and I learned a lot, and it was an experience that I never would have done had it not been for this opportunity here. So I encourage you to step out of your comfort zone, and I encourage you to log these, keep up with your logs on these, and remember, as long as you get your points, you do not have to take your exam again. That's the most value. My strategies for earning these points, I dedicated time. I attend all of the trainings, all of the webinars. Through COVID, that's all it was. We were in a Zoom world. And I did. I watched every webinar, every training, and I'd go in there and log it. But it also took me to a level where I was listening to things I normally wouldn't listen to. Because I'm so focused on compliance and certain aspects of financial aid, I was listening to topics that I normally wouldn't do because it was listed on how I could get points. And I learned so much, and I grew personally and professionally by doing that. Again, I talked about stepping outside of your comfort zone. I challenge that to everyone. It's also, you have to be engaged. To be at that level when you're a financial aid professional, you need to be present. You need to be involved, engaged. So the program is designed to inspire that through the recertification. And I think you'll be surprised once you get in there and start looking, and I'm happy to, if any of you are interested in what some of those activities are, I can schedule time with you, and I can share my screen and show you my dashboard and show you all the activities that are available there. Again, back to community. Community, credibility, continued learning. These all complement each other, but they're all different. The credentials demonstrate, we talked about the credentials, going into depth in certain topics. Where our program, our CFAA program, goes into the breadth of that knowledge across the entire financial aid community. And so, again, we want to contribute to the community and elevate the value and perception of the profession of being a financial aid administrator. It's kind of saying, hey, this isn't easy, but we can do it. We do it. We make it happen. When it comes down to the end of the day and that crunch minute, financial aid administrators, all of you, we make that happen. Why? Why do this? Why do this? I have a lot of people ask me that, and it starts the conversation. It's a brand. When you think of that, for those of you that have the designation, you can put that on your signature line. It's a brand. And it is such a conversation starter. It's very empowering for your staff to see that. And then watching them sitting back, and after you have that discussion, because it does start the conversation, or colleagues or friends, it's really neat to sit back and watch them take the initiative to start earning that designation and getting to that point. Start asking the questions. Pursuing that designation was an opportunity for me to flourish in my career. It allows me to share my knowledge, stay involved, stay engaged, keep up with it, and then keeping up with my knowledge of Title IV administration, that consistent. You know, I would encourage all of you to consider it, because all of you do. You have the competence, you have the knowledge, you have the skills. I am extremely passionate about the purpose of this committee and what being a CFAA represents. We benefit every day from the assistance, guidance, and service that we provide for our students. And I think this is an outstanding opportunity to promote our profession, as well as support all of our colleagues. And at the end of the day, we're only better serving our students and families. So that's my why. Questions? You can contact the certification office at NASFA. You can contact me. I'm happy to answer any questions about the program in depth. This is a quick overview of the nuts and bolts, but I hope that it provided you information to at least where you will go back and check that box where you are interested. And again, you know, there's always opportunities during recertification points for those of you that are have the designation. These two are coming up. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, FAAC Coordinating Board, and all of those watching. I'm open to questions if I can figure out how to there we go. Did I unshare? Yes.
Thank you so much, Shannon. We appreciate that great information. I'll open it up at this point for questions. Does anybody have any questions for Shannon, specifically regarding the the certification right now? Thomas?
Yeah, just a quick one, because I've got a staff member that's been asking me about this, and yet at the same time she is anxious about how well she might do. How's that success rate ratio for the first test take? I suspect that enough people have taken the test, so you guys have the stats on that.
You know what, Thomas? I do, but I don't have them with me. Okay. Let me get that for you, and I will send that to Denise and you can distribute it to your group. I will get that for you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you,
Great
Shannon.
question. Yes.
Any other questions? Certified Financial Aid Administrator? Okay, Shannon, thank you again so much. That's such great information. And as our profession grows, this is really real important for us to be recognized, because there is no major in financial aid administrators. You have to be an accountant, a psychologist, a mom, a friend, a teacher, all rolled up into one to be a financial aid administrator. So it's a very unique position that we are all in. Same goes for high school counselors. You guys are high school administrators are kind of in the same position we are. You have to be a little bit of everything to meet the needs of your students. Okay, so at this point in the agenda, let's take about a 15-minute break. And let's see, I'm showing 10:49, so let's just say it's 10:50, and let's all come back at 11:05. Does that work for everyone? All right, well, we'll see you at 11:05. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Looks like we got about a minute. Okay. We have everyone with us. I'm going to do a roll call just to verify that we have a quorum. All right. Are we ready? Okay. Ed?
Here.
DeChà?
Here.
Robert?
Here.
Cecilia?
Here.
Stephen?
Tevian, yes, I'm here.
And Stephen's
I'm here.
Okay, great. Jackie?
Here.
Look at the SAP standards, so it comes into play for SAP.
And Tevian, I got you. Joseph, I think, had to step off. Thomas?
Yes.
Victoria?
Here.
Millette? Okay, I'll circle back on Millette. Rochelle?
Here.
Joy?
Here.
Bridgette?
Here.
Dee Dee?
Here.
Holly?
Here.
Arnold?
Here.
Ben?
Here.
Shauna?
Here.
Jace?
Here.
Sal?
Here.
And Gilbert. Okay, I think Gilbert had to step off as well. Okay, so we have a quorum. Thank you guys for coming back, and we'll continue with the agenda. And at this point, we'll have the agenda item update, the TASFA subcommittee, Bridgette Ingram and Claudette Jenks. So if you guys want to take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The TASFA subcommittee has not met this year, but we will start meeting monthly in March to review the 23-24 TASFA. And since the online TASFA and the paper TASFA will align, we don't anticipate a lot of changes since the subcommittee already discussed and decided on changes last year to the form. So now Leah and her team would like to present the progress of the online TASFA, which will also drive the paper form changes. So I'll pass it over to Leah.
Thank you. So nice to see everybody. Thanks for having me. Claudette is actually on. She is on in the background. I asked her to join. She and I are kind of co-owning, chairing this wonderful initiative. And so she'll be on for a few minutes to try and field some questions if we have them. But just wanted to give you a quick update on our progress with online TASFA. You'll start to see more and more of this happening as we get closer and closer to the launch. But I'm going to share my screen real quick. I have a couple of little points that we'll go through, and then obviously once I'm done, y'all can ask questions and we'll go from there. So the first item is just, our continuation with programming. Now the application of itself is actually, can y'all see my screen by the way, real quick, just to, okay. The application itself is already built and working. So now, as if you've ever built something before, it's kind of fleshing out all the details, all the kinks, all the pieces. So we are doing that as we speak. We're trying to really scrub and make sure that technologically it is working properly. We've also moved into testing, and that's internally with the coordinating board. So that's, making sure that all of the inputs from the student level side are working properly, that our skip logic is working, that kind of thing. We will be moving into an external UAT, user acceptance testing, initiative in the next month or so. So that is going to be in collaboration with the committee, which is the one that Bridgette is chairing. And that's a combination of institutions and high school counselors and other folks that are involved and our stakeholders. So we're starting to get that ramped up. We are also collaborating with various vendors to get feedback on the file layout. So I'll show you in a minute how the online TASFA will kind of operate. It's kind of a flow chart to kind of conceptualize how it will work. But we did partner with different vendors to kind of get, is this going to work well? How can we make sure that, schools can take the file and then work with their vendor to make sure that they can import that data. One thing to keep in mind with the import process is that schools do need to start having those conversations with their vendor. We don't have connections with every single vendor and your particular person. And so while we have been working with those, the ones that we do have access to, it was really more of a collaborative, input kind of piece versus, we're at the coordinating board, we're not trying to send the information to the vendor or anything like that. So if you haven't already, please, I encourage all schools, start having those conversations, making sure that they know that the online TASFA is coming. Another thing to keep in mind is this is not a one-time launch. This is going to be a process that is going to need refinement. It's going to improve over time. It's not going anywhere. So it's going to be something that, schools will be able to refine and make better and better. So our goal to get this up and running is to make sure that students can go online, fill out their application, and that data gets over to the school, and the school can then, use that data to process an award package. So we are trying to get the file layout to the schools so that you can share that with your vendor. Like I said, because of the programming cleanup and making sure those refinements are happening, we want to make sure that the file layout we provide is useful. So we are trying to get that out as soon as we possibly can, but just know that we are trying to get those little last pieces cleaned up so that we can get that to you. The next piece you'll see on the screen is setting up folders and Move It. So if you're familiar with our Move It platform, which is an SFTP, which is a secure file transfer protocol, that allows us to exchange information between the institution and also the school. And so that is how we're planning to send the files over to the institution so that you'll have those TASFAs. So we're in the midst of getting that set up. So luckily, the school should be familiar with how to use that software and know where to get files, because that's how we transmit data between the two entities. So that's happening. And then lastly, you may have seen a promotional flyer that went out about a week or two ago, just kind of highlighting the benefits. I actually have it. It's not included in the handouts, but I thought I'd just shoot it up on the screen real quick so y'all can see it. It's very nice, very sharp. We sent this out to the schools so that you can understand the institutional and the student benefits. This is also going to be shared with school districts and through TEA. We're trying to kind of pipe it through different channels so that we can get the word out, but we do intend to do more promotional activities to really get people aware that it's coming in October. So this is just the promotional flyer I thought I'd share because I was really proud of my team. We have our new staff that created this flyer and she did a really great job. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. Let's see, shifting back over here. So let's look at the actual online TASFA. Again, I have a very visual here. This is in your handout, so you can pull it up, but you'll notice that the font is quite small because we wanted it to fit on one page. So luckily I can zoom in and show this to you a little bit more, but this is really the TASFA submission flow. And so I'm going to zoom in here and we're going to look at it a little bit piece by piece. Let's see if I can, I'm going to zoom in way in here. Okay, so if you can see on your screen, it's all going to start with the student initiating the application in some capacity. They're either going to do that through Apply Texas, they're going to go to College for All Texans, they're going to do a Google search, they're going to land on a TASFA webpage. From there, they're going to create a TASFA account through the coordinating board. That's a secure account where they'll be able to log in and see not only the current application, but any prior applications as the years pass. Once they create the application and they launch the form, then they would go on to fill out the various tabs that we have in the TASFA. Very similar to the FAFSA, we've tried to mimic a lot of things there so that there's some kind of familiarity, not necessarily for the student, but for the schools and the counselors, right? Like if you're going to be supporting students to fill this out, we're trying to have that kind of similar feel and language and everything else. So the student will go through the process of filling out their information, and then at a certain point, they're going to come to kind of the break in the road, which is the dependency questionnaire. So they're going to fill out the dependency questionnaire, and then from there, it will do a determination to figure out which direction it's going to go. If they're deemed independent, they move on with the application just like they would with the federal form. If they are dependent, I'll scroll up a little bit here. Then what happens is the parent is going to be given a secure link via email. They will enter a few validation for the student so that we can make sure that that actually went to the right email address. We don't want someone accessing the student's account if they don't have the correct credentials. So there's kind of a little validation that goes with the email. The student will then log in and have access to the form. The parent really ideally would just log in to sign it, but the parent would also have the ability to go back and make changes, make sure that all the information is accurate if they choose to do so. And then from that point, the parent would sign it. Now, one of the steps in between before all the signatures and the submission happens is the college section, right? We want to make sure we know who these applications are being sent to. So one of the things that we've built is it allows for up to 10 colleges for the initial submission. So we will capture those, and within the college tab, they're not only going to be doing their housing status, but we will also be collecting the college assigned ID if one is provided. We know it's not going to be a perfect process. You know, students make mistakes, or maybe they haven't enrolled or applied yet. Maybe they get the wrong one, they get confused. But the idea is if they do enter that as an optional code, the schools and the vendors can use that as a possible match. Keep in mind, most of these students are not going to have a social security number. Some will, some won't. So when you're talking about, you know, how do you kind of import this or match it to your system records, you know, we're trying to think of ways to do that. So that was one of the things we worked with, not only vendors, but the committee talking about different possible match points. Okay, so when they submit it, again, up to 10 schools, then it will go to the signature page. The parent, of course, is required to sign, and then ultimately the student signs. It won't allow a student to sign until the parent requirement has been met, unless they're independent, obviously, and then it would get submitted. Now, from there, they can submit that. It goes to our database at the coordinating board. And then each night we're going to do a batch process, which will pull all of the submitted TASFAs, and it's going to do two things. First and foremost, if you'll see at the top here, it's going to send a file through the high school counselor suite. And that's something that high school counselors will be able to log in, and they will be able to look not only to see their FAFSA completions, which they've had access to do, but now there will be a TASFA completion where they'll be able to check and make sure. Now, that is something we're also working on the programming for that right now, but ultimately high school counselors will be able to use this feature, and then they'll be able to do their requirement. The other thing that's going to happen is that the institutional files get created. Again, that's an extract each night. It will go into their Move It folder. Again, all of this could change. We'll always probably use an SFTP, but Move It is the current platform that we're using. So you'll go in, you'll download the file, and then you'll have it to either import or process as you see fit at the school. So that's kind of a quick snapshot. One thing I did want to back up on is the 10 schools. Now, once a application is submitted, it's submitted. There's no changes. There's no correction process. We're not doing versions or anything like that. So you may wonder, well, what if they make a mistake? All changes, updates, errors, anything like that is going to be addressed at the institutional level. We want the schools to have that control and make sure that they're collecting the paperwork that they deem suitable to clear that error versus the coordinating board trying to do all the processing and doing anything like that. The only thing that the coordinating board is doing is collecting the data on behalf of the school and routing it over to the school. You will then use that data to fill the gaps if there's anything missing, if they messed up, anything like that. So it's really, once the application is submitted, it's kind of on a lockdown. The only really cool thing is that they can log back in and they can add additional schools. So it's not, the FAFSA, you kind of have to go in and remove some OPIDs and replace them with others. This one will truly allow them to continue to add 10 at a time. And then it will send it off. Now, again, if it's 6 months after the fact and they've moved or something's changed, it's still going to be the original data that they entered and submitted to the first set of schools, but it will allow them to at least send that application to the additional schools, and it will still retain the original submission date. So that's kind of one of the things that we built in there to allow students to do more than just those 10. I just said a lot of stuff. I think that that's pretty much the gist of this. Now, I was telling DeChà and some of the others that we are planning to do a demo by the next FAAC. I also plan to do a demo once we get, again, the codes all kind of cleaned up. And if you are following the monthly webcast that I do the second Tuesday of every month, I will start doing demos of the TASFA and training. So we are going to be providing training on, how to look up things and kind of how the application will operate. So all of that is forthcoming, but this was my update for today to kind of give you a glimpse at what to expect. So really my wish and my communication out is please start talking to your vendors so that they know that this is happening. Know that if by October you don't have this perfect process set up and it's not, ready to go exactly how you had hoped it would be, it's okay. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be an evolution. We're going to continue to make it better. We're going to refine it. We're probably going to change it quite a bit once the federal form gets updated. There's a lot of language and questions being removed. We have built this one based on the current FAFSA, the current terminology. All of that is the same because we want to still be sending you the information that you can use to calculate that EFC, soon to be SAI, right? So I think that's it. I want to make sure I leave some minutes here for questions, but I will stop there and see what I can do if you have questions.
Thank you so much, Leah. Anyone have questions on this process?
Bridgette?
I actually have 2 questions. Just for my own knowledge, the high school counselors see this completion, they don't see it right now, but they will see this completion where?
I can answer that, Leah. Hi, everybody, it's Claudette. It'll be in the counselor suite in the Applied Texas counselor suite. So it's a connection that's already established. And so the counselors at the high schools already have access to this. It's just we're adding this additional component to it to provide the TASFA information. Like Leah said, they already have access to the FAFSA completion status. We'll be adding the TASFA completion information there in a similar manner.
So is there rumors about Applied Texas, and is there a contingency plan if something happens with Applied Texas, or will that counselor suite always be there?
The counselor suite, we plan to have the counselor suite with the system, yes.
Okay. Then my second question is, we had the sample guide. So is that being worked on now for the file layout, or is it just mainly the functionality of the application?
In the sample guide, you mean the layout that you were given as a committee? That was a mock-up draft, and so the institutions as a whole have not been given a file layout because that was purely for feedback purposes. So that went to handful of vendors and some of the schools to say, hey, like, how do we operate? So we have not released the file layout that schools will need to give their vendors or their IT or whatever resources they use for technology, but that is coming soon.
And that's both being worked on, the functionality of the application and that.
Yes, because the functionality drives the file layout. So if something, if we change a field, then the file layout changes, and so it's kind of a little dance back and forth. If we change something, we got to change the layout. So we are trying to wrap that up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think Arnold might be next.
Well, I don't have a question, Leah. I just have a comment. Thank you very so much for this, because this is, in my view, long overdue. We as an industry needed this application. But Arnold's like a little kid with a toy. Once he sees it, he won't let go. I will be looking forward to the file layout so I can start talking to my vendor and also start reviewing our internal processes, how we're going to handle the corrections and any changes that might happen. But anyway, I just wanted to take the time to thank this committee and the hard work of the coordinating board staff.
Well, thank you for that. We have been working very hard, but we're excited to show you. I can't wait till the next meeting when I can actually pull it up and, hopefully give you some real tangible, it's way more fun to see something in its, live state. So stay tuned on that one. And it may be before then. Again, I plan to kind of start giving people some idea on the webcast, because I think it's important for people to start visualizing that so that they can be prepared. I see another hand, but I don't know where it's coming from. Let's see.
It's Rochelle. Okay, so I had two things. You said that students are able to enter a school ID if they have it?
Yes, so we're building the college tab. They will select the college, and then the system will then generate what is their housing status. And then it also allows them to input a institutional ID. We're going to try and clarify very clearly, don't put your high school of the ID if you have an ID, because there's always going to be that, kind of misunderstanding with high school level students, like how, what do we mean by school? So we're always using the terms institution, college, that kind of thing.
Okay. I guess in my head, if they can enter more than, two schools, they could potentially have two different student IDs. That'll be something we'll have to deal with. So I'm just trying to process that. That's at least we'll have something to match on. So I'm grateful for that.
And I know you don't have the visual, but each school that they select has a housing status and has an ID. So it's specific to the college, which is cool, because again, one school they might live at home, another school they might live on campus. So we wanted to make the housing status specific to the school.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. And then my second question is, given the time frame and knowing our vendor, and I'm trying to remain positive and hopeful, if that doesn't work out, what kind of output will schools receive? Will it be something that we could potentially upload, like a CSV file?
So the files that we're creating that will be ready for the launch are going to be fixed length file. You'll have all the, import specs so that you can work with your vendor. Now we are working on alternatives because we know that sometimes vendors can take time. Testing has to be, it's not a one-time gig, right? So one of the things we're doing is, we're going to try and create a daily report. And so that's going to be a comprehensive listing of all TASFA submitted. It would have the student's information, date, and all of that. The second thing is we do have the capability of creating different file formats. Ultimately, we don't want different ones for every school, but what we may end up doing is providing a CSV file so that schools can then use that in a different capacity than an import. You know, you'll be able to download it into Excel and do what you need to maintain or to process those. So we are doing different layouts for the pure aspect of, we know schools, or not all schools are going to be able to import information from the get-go. It'll take those months, could be up to a year before school has it like refined and ready to go. So we're trying to look at alternatives so that schools can still do their business.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ed?
Yeah, just clarification on the requirement of students to submit the TASFA electronically, or, you know, this online version. Is that going to be the case, that this is the only way a student can apply for a TASFA, or is there going to be a paper version? And if so, a paper version, will that be submitted to the state? And then that information will come to the school. So that's the first question, just kind of how, you know, how this will change every school doing their own thing to this being a state application. The other, you mentioned, you know, once it's submitted, any corrections, updates, any information that would be at the school level. You know, is there going to be a mechanism possibly to communicate back to the state that information, especially if the state is using that FAFSA data for any analysis, you know, determination of, you know, student profile, all of that, you know, that it's current information, not maybe what was originally submitted?
So to answer your first question, the paper TASFA is not going away. You're going to have families that don't feel comfortable submitting electronically, just like the paper FAFSA. You know, they have that option available. We're going to continue to produce that, and it's going to mimic or align with the online form the best way possible. As you know, the paper FAFSA is much more extensive than the online because of all the skip logic, so it may be similar in that capacity. So they will have access to both, and they can make that decision. Another thing that we're working on, our best, is once they finish the online TASFA, it's going to be mapped to a PDF. So the student is going to be able to go into their account, and they would be able to download a copy of their online TASFA that they submitted, and it would look similar to the paper form that we're going to publish online. So they can go in at any point and say, I submitted it on this day, here's what I did. That would be what it is in that moment, right? So again, if they change it or they correct it, it's not going to be whatever they did at the school. It's going to be what they submitted to the state. But we are working on that functionality so that, again, for high school completion status, or if they want for historical purposes to have a copy of their TASFA, they'll have that. The last thing is, plenty of people will get to the finish line and they're not going to feel comfortable submitting it electronically, or maybe they can't figure it out, or maybe their parent won't help them. You know, there's all the scenarios. So it will allow them to do a print. So it'll pull in the information into a PDF. They can print it, sign it, and mail it off. We are not going to be collecting paper FAFSAs at the coordinating board and, you know, kind of somehow getting them into the system. If they do it paper, it goes to the school just like it always has. But we will be maintaining, you know, a PDF version in our system, and we will be routing submitted electronic information to the school. If they don't ever hit the submit button, we don't have it established right now on, like, you'd be able to go in and query or look at the status. We are looking at that. I don't know that will be an October launch feature, because obviously, you know, we want to build like an administrative portal of some sort, but all of that takes time and refinement. So right now, the online application will be available, that we'll send the data over to the school. If it's submitted, they'll have access to either print a PDF, they can look at their status, or they can do the online, I shouldn't say online, the paper form, which is the fillable PDF, will still be generating that. The second question you have on the corrections, I think I answered that by saying, like, we're not taking any corrections. At this point, I don't know what analysis or kind of information would be used from the TASFA data. I don't think that it was created for that intent. So we're telling people that we're not going to be doing anything with their information, right? Like, it's just a pass through. So If anyone else has any information on that, feel free to share. But right now, it's truly just us collecting it and routing it to the school. I don't know what future information will be extracted from that.
So maybe just to summarize what you're saying, I mean, this really is just another method for the student to provide the TASFA information to the school, so the school moves forward with determining eligibility for state aid. And that, you know, whatever, you know, policies we have of appropriate signature, appropriate documentation, appropriate, all of that that has existed in the past, that's not changing at all. You know, so it's just basically, this is just another way the student can provide the data, and then once we have it, it's up to the school to determine what more do we need to determine state eligibility based on the way we've always done it before. It's just we're getting the application potentially in a different format or information, the data.
That's correct. So we're not doing any processing of data, you know, creating any EFC. We're not telling the schools that they have to verify things or what paperwork or documents they have to collect, nothing like that. So yes, based on your situation and your policies, you would still be able to make those decisions. We're putting wording in there like we always have, like the institution may require extra documentation, you know, you may need to submit extra, you know, stuff like that. So we're trying to make sure that we are clear with people that this is not the, once they submit it, this is it. There could be extra steps, but the idea for sure is this will reduce the likelihood of errors because we have validation set. They're not going to leave things blank that they maybe forgot on the paper form. And it will get there faster and less likelihood that it'll get routed to the wrong department or in the mail. So it's always going to be sent directly to, you know, your inbox. You'll get it. You'll have a report. So it will be a more streamlined process. But overall, no, the procedural part on the school side will not change. Bridgette, I see you again.
I just want to add for Ed what you were saying. That's what we do now since we have an electronic. Any corrections or changes, we make them submit like a statement, or we have our own form. So, but you said something, Leah, that made me think about the customer service piece of this. We get a lot of questions within the time the student's filling out the FAFSA about where they are in the process or what's left. So y'all would have the customer service number for them to call to find out all the answers to all the questions about the electronic application.
Oh, they don't do that with us. Just kidding. No, we do have, right now we have the Texas, the TFAC line, the Texas, oh my gosh, why am I going blank, DeChà? Texas Financial Aid Information Center line. You think I know it, I just use the acronym, don't we all? So that's a statutory helpline that we have for the state of Texas, and we're planning to kind of promote that as the helpline until we gauge volumes, right? So we don't know what to expect, if it's just we're going to get flooded or if it's going to be crickets, and you know, it's pretty straightforward. We shall see, but we are going to field questions with the technology, and we already field a lot of TASFA questions, believe it or not, but y'all don't ever get them. They come through our line daily. How do we do this? Now, 9 times out of 10, we send them back to the school, but at least they have a line to call and we can answer certain basic questions. But if they have like real nitty gritty things that the school would need to answer, like what do I turn in or where do I mail this thing to? That's the kind of support we provide. So we are working on that as well. Like customer service wise, how are we going to field these questions and route them appropriately so that they can do stuff? So we are planning for that. Shauna.
Hi, I apologize if you've already answered this because it was a lot of information and I was definitely trying to take notes. My counselors are very excited about the online TASFA, so I would like to reiterate that. We are a multi-high school district, and so one of the things that I am always pulling for my superintendent and my board is from the federal government FAFSA, where they will give us like an as of February the 18th, here's how many that were submitted this year, here's how many FAFSAs that were submitted last year during the same time period. Is there any consideration that that same thing would be available for TASFA now that we will have an online component?
Never even thought of that. I mean, I guess, we will house the data and would have the ability to do it. I don't know what our restrictions on that would be because of the whole FERPA piece of it. I don't know. But I would think that we would be able to summarize and do that kind of the pull. Right now, the biggest piece on the high school part is making sure that the high school information is right. So we have to know, there's a lot of algorithms that have to happen because we don't want to send the school a bunch of TASFAs that don't align with the right age range. So we're working on that. And then, of course, high school names change all the time and keeping up with that. So to answer your question, we have not considered that yet. And I think that that's a great thing to bring up. We're taking meeting notes right now, so I'll make sure to grab those and possibly even contact you offline just to get more information on that because I'm not familiar. Claudette probably knows exactly what you're talking about, but she had to jump off. So I can also circle back with her. But I do think that the information might be there. It's a matter of, do we have the authorization to do it? So I'll find out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? My quick 10-minute update has turned into a half hour, so lucky y'all.
You're good. Thank you so much, Leah.
Yes.
I think we're all really excited about this option. Just to give our students some flexibility. Don't know who's going to utilize it. Like you said, they may get to the submit part and not choose to go ahead and submit it, but at least they have the option available. Thank you again for the hard work that you and your team and Claudette and her team and Bridgette and all of you guys do on this online TASFA. So our next agenda is the data collection subcommittee. Dee Gonzalez is our subcommittee chair. Dee?
Hi, everyone. The data collection subcommittee met last week, and we got that wonderful TASFA update that Leah just provided was on the agenda. We also talked about the FAD data modernization project. That's the method we use to submit the FADS files. That's still on target to go live for the 21-22 Cycle 2 FADS. We got an update on the Office of Student Financial Aid Programs that I believe DeChà is going to give the group a little later on. We discussed the challenges of navigating the authority to transfer process, got some feedback on that. An update is that the authority transfer form will be created in an online application version. We did discuss quite a bit the FAD certification process and some challenges with certifying our FADs in that last cycle. Some of the issues discussed were when you're submitting work study, of course, work study is earnings and it has cents on it, and you're not allowed to submit cents in the FADs. So there was a suggestion to either allow a $100 threshold for penny rounding issues or to allow the reporting of cents. The reporting of cents, there's some system limitations with that and some programming changes that would be required, but the coordinating board was very agreeable to considering the $100 threshold. So that was much appreciated. Should make it much easier to finish that process in the future. We also discussed for the state grant programs, specifically Texas grant, increasing or decreasing that student count. You currently have to do it in 2 places, and the suggestion was consider only requiring 1. And that change is under review, and that entire reconciliation process is actually being reviewed to make it simpler and easier to navigate by the coordinating board. We also discussed the length of time sometimes that it takes from when you get that final report with no errors to when you can certify. The FAD data modernization project is supposed to help with that. It should, make the time quicker. But we also, I think during that discussion, it came out that maybe some of the emails that go out when things are error-free were not necessarily going out. So my understanding was the coordinating board would be looking into that to see what was going on with that. So, and I just want to say to Sheri, we much appreciate y'all listening to our feedback on that. It's very, very helpful. And the last thing is we discussed the topics for the FAS webcasts, just to see if there were any ideas that the committee had on future topics. There weren't any, people were going to think, but if any of this group has suggestions for them, let us know and we can pass them along. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dee Dee. Great work on that subcommittee. Any questions for Dee Dee? Okay, we'll move on in the agenda and go to the legislative subcommittee. Arnold Trejo.
Thank you, Denise. Just a very quick update. One of the on our last meeting we had discussed the possibility of collaborating between our committee and with the TASFA Legislative Issues Committee. And I've been in contact with Ari Gray, who is the current chair of the TASFA Legislative Issues Committee. And we've set up some I have been invited to their future meetings, March 31st, June 23rd, and September 15th, and then going into our fall TASFA conference. But again, the whole gist was for us to collaborate so we could be communicating. So I'll be serving as an advisor in the TASFA Legislative Issues Committee, and hopefully we can, as I mentioned before, identify common themes and whatnot. And lastly, I will just say, I mean, like our colleague this morning, John Wyatt, articulating, it's the calm before the storm. So I know that right now I don't have much to report, but with the legislative session kicking into gear pretty soon, I'm pretty sure that we're going to throttle up with more issues. So Denise, that's all I have at this point.
Thank you so much, Arnold. I appreciate the collaboration with TASFA, letting us go ahead and kind of piggyback on that and do collaboration versus having to do separate meetings.
Right.
Any questions for Arnold? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to the next agenda item, the TASFA update by Robert Marino.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. So you may notice that the regional trainings are currently going on. On Tuesday, we had the Houston training at San Jac. We had about 35 people actually attend. And today, the San Marcos training is going on at Texas State. We have 43 people registered for that event. On March 23rd, we have the El Paso training with 41 people registered. On March 25th, we have the DFW at Collins College with 66 people registered. And then on March 31st, we have the Lubbock training with 47 people registered. Also, at the end of the month, we are going to be offering a virtual event for those people that cannot attend the in-person. In addition, the new aid officers workshop registration is open. The event is going to take place at Grapevine on April 20 to the 22nd. Currently, we have 51 people registered. And then finally, TASFA sent a small delegation to the NASFA Leadership and Legislative Conference in mid-February. As part of the legislative conference, we met with staff from offices of Representative Joey Arrington, Representative Sugar Garcia, and Senator John Quinn. We talked about federal topics such as double and pale and eliminating loan origination fees. In addition, we mentioned some of the unintended consequences of the TASFA simplification, such as selective service and drug-related questions, how they're affecting our state programs. although, they're not over there, but maybe they can talk to some of their state colleagues. But we wanted to mention that there were some unintended consequences from the federal level. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Robert. Any questions for Robert? Okay, hearing none. Let's do an update from our high school districts. Ben Boland, Shauna Norton.
Hey, Shauna, if you don't mind starting first, I'm supervising lunch duty here at the same time, so I'm going to try to get to a quieter place.
Sure. Okay. So I know one of the things, I'll refer kind of back to last time when we were talking, and I think we were still struggling to get students to complete FAFSAs around here. And we were really concerned that we were still going to have kind of that last minute May push. Not to say that we won't, but in currently looking at our FAFSA completion data, we have quite a few more students in our district who have completed the FAFSA as compared to last year during the same time period, which is also we're happy about because our enrollment is down. So we are experiencing more. I guess I would like to look at what we're looking at the end of the year to see if that actually means we have more students complete the FAFSA in total, or if that just means we're having more of them complete it sooner because it's a graduation requirement. Then I'll be also interested to see how many of those students who complete FAFSA actually enroll in college and kind of follow through with that, because I know that, or I believe that that was the purpose of making it a graduation requirement, was try to increase enrollment in your colleges for our students. So that's one thing. And then also in talking with some of the counselors and districts in our area, they're kind of seeing some of the same things. They had a really slow start, but right now it looks like they've got more of their students who have completed the FAFSA than what they normally do this time of year, and they're just waiting to see, is it going to be we have more students complete, or we have just more students complete earlier. So and then that I know I already said this, but everybody is super excited about the online TASFA, and we're just like ready to see what it looks like and what the rollout looks like. And I think some people are already ready for next year school year. That would be about all I think that I wanted to mention.
Oh, thank you, Shauna. Ben, are you where you can visit with us?
Hey, I apologize if you guys hear background noise, but I'll do the best I can. You get some of the things like Shauna was saying. We're having a lot of evening scheduled parent nights coming up for FAFSA in the district. One of the things that our district's hitting really, really hard is the CCMR points. Of course, that applies to our accountability. And one of the biggest issues, we're coming across is TSI, just the barrier that presents. We'll have students taking TSI and not being successful with TSI A2. And so we've been implementing a lot of students going through the college bridge to get because that becomes a barrier where students, even pursuing the financial aid, they don't feel like they can do it because of what they're seeing when they are taking TSI A2. And we've been having a lot of students complete College Bridge and make that a push so they can be eligible to those institutions that have an agreement. And so that's trying to assist with those numbers for students to continue on with FAFSA. But yeah, like Shauna said, that electronic form, having that updated nightly, that's really, really helpful, and really, I think, going to be a big difference in increasing those numbers going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have a high school just tonight that I'm going to work with in our service area for filling out the FAFSA. So thank you guys so much for what you do. Does anybody have any questions for Shauna or Ben? If not, I'll turn it over to DeChà, and we can get an update from her office.
I think I saw Ed raise his hand. So
sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll ask. So just with this TASFA and FAFSA high school completion, just a few things in working with some local high schools. I mean, one thing I'm hearing from them sometimes is they're having trouble with that Apply Texas suite of confirming the student has completed the FAFSA. And so just wondering, is that an issue, or is it just maybe the individual school, kind of knowing how to use that suite? The second is, they've reached out and they've said, hey, can you tell us if this student's completed the FAFSA, because, we can't figure it out and the students told us. And so am I understanding right? I mean, there are multiple methods that you can utilize to confirm the students completed the FAFSA, and it's up to the school's discretion. So the student showing them, the output email that says they've completed it, whatever, that should be sufficient, that they don't need something official, or even if the student could provide a screenshot of maybe the school's portal that shows an EFC, a FAFSA complete, you would say, at least from your interpretation of requirement, the school could accept that. They wouldn't need something officially, from the suite or something else. So that kind of question. And then the last thing, and maybe broader, is, as you had mentioned, reading, hey, is the FAFSA completion, obviously, are we getting FAFSAs earlier? And so how to read that. And I think that's something at my institution, especially our enrollment folks are asking, hey, this looks great. We got a lot more students are going to come because they've submitted their FAFSA, and just how, maybe how other schools that might not be high schools as much, but other schools are kind of reading, the earlier receipt. And then, what we're seeing at least is a big trend down of, in the past, we would have got a lot more FAFSAs later. And is that, kind of what we're going to see versus how much, how much do we put on, they've submitted their FAFSA on, the level of interest, and just, that's just a new dynamic, which I would say overall good that students are completing the FAFSA to see the possibilities, but it's just changing the environment. So anything on those areas?
I think maybe I can address a couple of them, maybe not the last one. But as far as the counselor suite in Apply Texas, I would say that's probably a combination of both, because we definitely have, if it's not something that you're getting on regularly, our counselors that I know that just like every once in a while pop in there, they're definitely having issues with trying to navigate it. But at the same time, I do know there's been some glitches here and there with some students. So I think that's probably a combination of both with that. My understanding as far as meeting the graduation requirements was that was a local decision of what kind of documentation that you wanted. And for our district, we wanted documentation that was not going to be a lot of work for the higher level institutions. And so we didn't want to require a letter from any of the colleges stating, yes, we've received the FAFSA, or yes, we've received the TASFA. So we are accepting printouts of their, award, or a screenshot of their portal that says this has been completed. I don't know what other schools necessarily are doing, but anytime we can do something that doesn't require someone else to do more work, that's kind of where we lean. And I'm not sure what Ben's campus is doing, but that's kind of where we lean for that.
So I think what I hear, the idea of a pushback to the school to say, we don't really need to provide this, from our understanding of what the state is requiring of you to confirm it. And, again, we want to be helpful, but again, even the appropriateness of us sharing FAFSA data, to a school, I'm still a little saying, hey, if the school can provide that, or the student can provide that, and the student should be able to provide something sufficient, we don't need, to be that certifying source for what, the high schools are being measured by or audited on with, is this sufficient proof? So
yeah, I mean, I feel it should be student responsibility. If nothing else, they've applied to 10 or 15 colleges, perhaps. Then which one are we picking to say, hey, we want you to provide us with that data? So.
Yeah, and then I, again, the idea of if there seem to be issues with that counselor suite and everything, really directing them to, the folks at the state that that manage that, to deal with it. Again, feeling, hey, I'm not really able to give you much, I can't tell you what's happening or not my area, but, want to get you where you need to go. And still continue to be helpful. And like you say, with, being available for FAFSA nights and things like that and all of that to help them, it's not any desire to not be helpful, just like you're saying, you don't want to put more on other folks when the student really can, or the parent can be the one to probably satisfy what is needed. So thanks.
And Ed, I'll definitely jot that down as far as the apply Texas and reach out to my the division here at Claudette. It's a part of who oversees some of those questions that come up, and just find out kind of what's going on with that. So thank you for bringing it forward. Sal, I see your hand was raised. I think you have a question or a comment.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Shauna and Ed were saying. Like on my campus, I'm actually the one that takes, I make sure that the students are submitting the FAFSA, and I do it by what Shauna said. It's ultimately the student's responsibility. They'll take a screenshot of the successfully submitted or processed screenshot with their name from the FAFSA application, and they'll submit that to me, and we'll use that as our documentation. So we don't really rely on the higher institutions to provide that for us. We keep track of that ourselves. So that's what we're doing here in our district, and all of our high schools here in El Paso are following the same system. So it's really more the student and parent responsibility to make sure that we get that information. So that's how it's working on our end.
Thank you, Sal, for sharing that information. Denise, it's at 12. Do we want to continue through the agenda? Find out if committee members are good to go.
Is everybody okay to keep going? We just have a few more agenda items. Yep. So probably everybody's good. We'll just press forward. Perfect. Okay.
I will try to see if I can move my update to 5 minutes. See what I can come up with. Some of this you've already heard, so I will definitely kind of be brief on some things. Just give some recent announcements on what's been going on in student financial aid programs. So effective March 1st, the agency reduced the interest rate on certain Cal loans from 5.25%, 5.25%, to 3.75%. These were loans that were made between August 2011 and October 2013. And so far, this impacts over 6,500 loans. We were also able to reduce this interest rate due to the recent low interest rate. We plan to do something very similar to this on April 1st that will impact approximately 5,500 loans, and we'll be doing some more interest rate reduction. So for those borrowers who had loans through those time periods, they were notified, and so we're excited that they were able to kind of reduce that interest rate, especially towards their own payment. We also released some memos recently. We released a memo regarding the B.1.10 strategy funds. So all of our 3 grant programs got additional funding that was appropriated, and we had hoped to try to get that funding for that appropriation into the grant payment portal. Unfortunately, due to some complexity of programming, we had to go an alternative approach. And so we released a memo on March 1st talking about that alternative approach. It outlines that there is a online request form where you're only requesting the dollars from that particular strategy. You must first utilize all the original allocation that is actually set up in the grant payment portal before you can start requesting those additional funds. You also make some changes to the student count through the grant payment portal. So when it comes down to reconciliation, it'll be a lot easier to reconcile for those student counts. Again, that memo was released on March 1st. So if you want to go back for those who request any funds or want to make sure to share, it went out to the financial aid directors only. So you may have to have that memo disseminated downward. We did put it on our Student Financial Aid Programs website along with the form just for ease to get to it. Leah talked about this a little bit earlier. We released a flyer for the monthly webcast on March 1st as well with the topics of discussion. So make sure that you or any of your staff members tune in on March 8th at 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time to get some updates that Leah will be providing. On the 28th of February, we opened up Cycle 1 for the FY22 FAD. I believe there were some delays in receiving some edit reports. We got some information from some schools who had submitted their FAD file on that opening date and were not getting their edit reports to them. Those issues have been resolved. So if you're any one of those schools who were waiting on some resolution, you can go ahead and resubmit your file. If you haven't already submitted a file, I highly do encourage you to submit your file so that way you can start working through those errors and have more than enough time to do so. The deadline date is April 18th for Cycle 1. Also, we released a memo regarding the state financial aid opt-in, opt-out on the 22nd of February. All institutions are required to complete this opt-in, opt-out form. It is due March 11th to participate in these 3 state financial aid programs: educational aid exemption, Texas College Work Study, and Work Study Student Mentorship. So those are the 3 programs that require a opt-in or opt-out selection. And we did try to make it quite easier on the online form that we sent out. Institutions that do not submit the form by the deadline will not be included in the allocation calculation process for the fiscal year 23. Again, upcoming deadlines, we have an upcoming deadline for the Financial Aid Advisory Committee nomination, which is due March 11th. I already spoke about the opt-in, opt-out form, which is also due March 11th. And Good Neighbor nomination forms for those schools who participate in the Good Neighbor program, those are due on March 15th. And some of highlighted accomplishments I want to just describe is we were able to generate almost 40,000 IRS 1098E tax returns for our borrowers, and they were mailed out as January 31st. So we're glad to have gotten that big project out of the way. That actually concludes all of my updates. I think I did that in 5 minutes. Hopefully, but I see, Millette, you do have your hand raised. I will take questions at this point.
Hey, DeChà, thank you so much. I really just wanted to give kudos to whoever deserves them for the opt-in, opt-out form. I'll be honest, I dread that form a little bit every year because I always seem to do it wrong. But this year was fantastic. I had put it off a few days and I thought, okay, I'll just go do it. And I clicked on the link and I mean, it just took no time at all. So I'm just grateful for y'all's attention to that. It really made a pretty big difference to me. So thank you.
Well, I definitely appreciate that compliment. I will have to give credit where credit is due to Leah Smalley. She definitely was able to provide a much easier way to create this particular form. You will start noticing that we are trying to do better at streamlining and making navigation for the schools a lot easier when it comes to submitting anything to the coordinating board. So you will continue to see those type of improvements, especially when it comes to any forms or reports that you have to submit to the agency. So I will not take credit on that other than editing and looking at it, but she was the creation of that particular form to make it much easier for you all to kind of get through it and submit it on time. That's the whole deal. We want to make it easier for you to meet that deadline. So kudos to Leah and her team for sure. So that actually concluded my update. If there's no other questions, then Denise, we can definitely, oh, Ed? Oh, you're on mute, Ed.
There you go. So, you mentioned that alternate way of securing state funds, Texas grant funds in our particular case. Just want to be assured, because we're in the first year of 2 years of funding, any money we might roll to the second year, the fact that it's coming from a different source doesn't affect that those funds would be available next year. So
no. So great question. So that is no matter was it from the original or from this additional pot, if you don't use it all, you will get it in the next fiscal year. So it's just a matter of how we're paying out those funds to the school, but not whether or not you'll receive them or not.
Yeah, just wasn't sure if those funds had different rules or anything. And then the second question, and you didn't mention, but I know another deadline coming up is submitting our cost of attendance information. And, you know, what I had read there was the idea of, you know, you need to submit by this date. You know, what we're experiencing in our institution is at least a potential delay of tuition and fee increases. Normally these decisions would be made, but my understanding is that's not been brought forward officially for next year to our Board of Regents. So yeah, a little concerned about, you know, again, if that happens after we need to submit cost of attendance and the inability to adjust that at the state level, you know, if, you know, we are choosing to adjust our cost of attendance later based on a change in, you know, tuition and fee rates from, you know, a current year freeze is what, you know, we're currently working under. Any issues, and then I don't know if other schools that's, you know, a dynamic you're dealing with as well as establishing cost of attendance for next year, because those rate decisions have not been possibly completely confirmed like they would be in the past by this time.
Great point. The college student budgets are handled in another division. However, I am writing down that concern and see if we can get something for the next, well, the next meeting is June. I think the deadline's April 1st for those college student budgets. So I'll try to get something out to the committee members related to that particular concern. I will find out from my colleagues regarding some challenges that you brought up, Ed, and if any others have those same challenges, if there's any flexibility or what is the process for modifying later on those tuition costs. Any other questions from the committee? Well, thank you all. And if you come up with anything else, please feel free to reach out to me or anyone on my team.
Thank you so much, DeChà. We appreciate that update. So the next topic is we're going to kind of circle back to the reskilling and just kind of work through how many of you on the committee, your school is participating in the Reskilling and Upskilling program grant. Jackie, you guys are participating?
Yes, we are. And I think we have just 2 or 3 more students that we need to award, and then we will have spent all of our funds.
Awesome.
We had a lot of problems spending the funds until they made the last round of changes. And once they did not care how long it was going to take a student to complete their program, that's when we were able to start awarding. So we awarded quite a bit in the fall, and we're finishing those awards in the spring.
Well, that's awesome. Rochelle?
Well, we're participating, and as I had mentioned earlier, we're having difficulty spending it. Now I know the changes helped us at least target those students, but I don't know if it's and again, I'm not on this committee. My associate director's doing it along with our executive director of enrollment and institutional research. I don't know if it's a matter of, I really don't know what they're looking at to market to these students or how they're marketing it. We've just been unsuccessful on trying to get those students in and awarded. We've not awarded any at this point. I really am just looking for suggestions. Like I said, I don't know what we're doing at the marketing level, what student groups we're looking at, but anything that, and I'm wondering if it's a regional Denise, you and I are kind of in the same location. If it has to do with where we're located. Looking at the Texas Workforce Information, I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but it's been really difficult. So I'm just looking for any kind of advice at this point, if anyone has any.
I'm right there with you, Rochelle. We did manage to spend a good portion in fall, and then but spring we are struggling to spend reskilling simply because we don't have the students that, if we have, they didn't stop out, or they didn't meet the qualifications as much. And so we're really struggling on our end as well with getting students in the pipeline. Jackie and then Gilbert.
What we have done, because we didn't have any luck when we advertised for students to apply for it. So what we did, we just got lists from our registrar's office. We got reports of students who had set out. And then, we started running reports to see which of them had applied for financial aid, were not in default. Then we checked NSLDS to make sure that they hadn't attended any other schools. So there was a whole lot of manual work, and we started out with hundreds of people on the list of people that had started out. And by the time we got it down, I think we were looking at about 70 students for spring that, that we could reach out to. And then, of course, we had to reach out to them, have them to apply, let us know if they were impacted by COVID. And y'all know it's hard to get students to do that. So we have been calling them, texting them, emailing them, everything that we can possibly think of to get them in there. But like I said earlier, we are almost at the end of this road, and we're so thankful for that. It's really been a pretty hard journey.
Agreed. Gilbert?
I have some clarifying questions about eligibility for this. So in case you all may not know, Austin Community College, I know, was one of the, I think, tier 1 or first cohort of grantees. And I know that we helped with our school districts in terms of a summer transition program promoting short-term certification pathways to grads that didn't have a college plan. Now, I don't think that this fell under this particular program, but I'm just curious, does this cover, it sounded to me like this program provided financial aid and other incentives for students to enroll in short-term credentialing pathways. Does it apply? And because when you hear upskilling or reskilling, you're maybe thinking about adults returning to get upskilled, or folks transitioning from one profession to another that are needing a credential. So just curious if and how high school students, recent high school grads, are being targeted, especially those that don't have applications on file, and how y'all are collaborating with school districts on that, or is that even an option for this? I'm not entirely clear, so just trying to understand a little bit better.
Thanks, Gilbert. That's a great question. According to the qualifications that are in the reskilling, the student had to be enrolled in an eligible undergraduate program or short-term workforce credential program as full-time or part-time, and has not been enrolled in an accredited post-secondary institution in a previous semester or previous 6 months. And then there was a completion portion that was actually taken out in October. So I think most of us as financial aid administrators are under the impression that they have to be students that have stopped out of programming. And so that not necessarily a high school student would not be, would qualify for that. Now, I think Dr. Ranis is still on the call with us. I'm not sure if she can elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I am still on the call. Hi. Gosh. Okay. So the link in to high school students is only because I think you're right. I think Denise, your sense of this is correct, and your colleague's sense of this is correct. This is about folks who are returning to post-secondary education. So that student has to have some post-secondary credit. And so the link to hire it to high school students are for those who are dual enrolled and have got post-secondary credit, but also have a stop out period before re-enrolling in community colleges. Does that make sense?
I think it does. So a student that has dual credit in high school but didn't matriculate immediately after graduation might be someone that a college or a school district can help.
As long as they have post-secondary credits, right? So through that dual credit enrollment. Yes.
Thank you for that. That's helpful.
Sure, no problem. Navigating this is not easy, as you know, we've been saying all along. Appreciate your efforts. I mean, our colleagues at TSTC have done amazing work.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts or ideas? Anybody else working with this program on your campuses that are on the committee? It has been a challenge, and I do so appreciate Dr. Ranis and her team for working with us and being flexible to change some of the rules. And throughout the process, it has been a payer of last resort. And then we got some changes made that we could actually pay before Pell, and so that is allowed us to have some more students to put in the pipeline. And so we do appreciate the flexibilities that she and her team have allowed for us, and the time frame completion flexibilities that they've given us to try to get these students to be able to come back. Great idea with the targeting the dual credit students that have stopped out. I hadn't thought about that, so that's an awesome idea. I'm going to take that back to my committee. Thank you, Gilbert, for that input, because I really honestly have thought my thought process is students that have stopped out in their college career, or students that had started and family got in the way or life got in the way, and so hopefully we can give them an opportunity to come back. So if there are any other comments or questions about reskilling? Okay, we'll go on to the next agenda item, and that is we're going to go back to DeChà for decrease in loan borrowing.
Yes, so we've noticed here within the agency, as we're looking at different data that's coming in, a decline in the number of borrowers based on this particular data from year over year. We're noticing that students, we don't have as many debt that, again, we're not for debt, but we did notice that there's less debt. So we're just trying to see if there's any trends or what's happening at your institution where students are borrowing less, and what do you believe can be that reasoning? Because as we're looking at our portfolio and we're seeing that there's less borrowing, we want to be able to see what's happening out in the community just to see if there's things that are trending or changing, if there are other aid students are receiving, because that's helpful to know that there's more funding for them, or if there is something that we're just not considering ourselves. So just trying to get an understanding of what's happening with at the students at your school. What are you seeing? So we can, definitely determine, this is why we're seeing less debt, and maybe that we need to continue any initiatives that we're looking at because it is working. So any feedback that you may have would be very helpful, and that's why we wanted to kind of bring it here to the committee. Cecilia, I did see you raise your hand up first.
Yes, that is happening here on our campus, and in our opinion, it's because we have less students on campus. They are virtual, and so they don't need as much funds to school. So we're covering their charges with grants and scholarships, and a lot of our students are receiving discounts from the CARES, the HERF money. We have offered our students tuition discounts and balance forgiveness, things like that, in order to utilize the funds. So that's what's been happening on our campus. We do have a less number of students applying for federal loans and state loans.
That's helpful. Thank you, Cecilia. Sal.
Yeah, so I actually work with the students as they transition into college, and I hear from them directly that they don't want student loans. They're very averse to them. They are very afraid of student debt, and their parents as well are that's the last and final option, if at all, being on the table. And so like in the instances with my students, we are in early college, high school, and a lot of them graduate with the Associate of Science degree, and that helps them cut a lot of the cost as well. And so they will matriculate to our university here at UTEP, and they'll live at home, and they'll cut costs by doing that, and they'll just use grant money and whatever scholarship is available to them to cover the cost. And usually that's more than enough so that they can cover tuition and fees and all of that stuff. So, and I'm kind of seeing that across the board with other schools in our district as well. So I think it stems a lot from just they don't want debt also, and they're trying to avoid it at all costs.
That's real helpful. Thank you. And again, like I said, we're definitely seeing that. So we're trying to find out, what is happening out there. Is it, like you mentioned, more awareness of debt? Is it more funding is, made available? So therefore, loans, is not the first thought of an option to cover any of these charges. So I appreciate that feedback. Millette.
Hey, I think we do get a lot of feedback. Of course, all my students are graduate level. And we do get quite a bit of feedback from students who, and we can talk all day about whether this is good or bad, but I do hear feedback from students who, the Grad Plus process is just easier. It is just, to get a Grad Plus loan as opposed to a Cal loan, it just is fewer steps. And that's not anybody's fault. The Cal is a private loan. It has to go through those disclosure pieces. It's, it's not necessarily a statement about, the coordinating board or the technology or anything else. It's just the way it is. But we do get that feedback quite a bit. Well, we suggest the Cal loan because of the interest rate and, that kind of stuff. And they just, say, well, I did that last year and it took forever. Or I did that last year and I, forgot to do this. And so it took long, it just seems they, unfortunately, regardless of how much you explain the benefits, sometimes they just opt for the easy. And that's, like I said, that may speak badly of my students, but it is the feedback that we get. So just for what that's worth.
A lot. Definitely. I think it's good to hear if there are challenges with a process, especially if it's applying for anything. And like you said, although the college access loan may have its own benefits, but if the process seems a little tedious, then people will opt out of it and go for something that is much easier and seamless to get through. So thank you, Millette, for that feedback. Very helpful. Anyone else from the committee like to share kind of what's happening at their schools and what they're seeing? I definitely heard about enrollment is down, so that could, definitely be the reason why borrowing could definitely be down, and funding is more available. Does anyone else have anything to add to what they're seeing as well? Robert, thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, along with what the Cecilia was saying about the abundance of emergency relief money, I think that has helped a lot of the students. In addition, a lot of us, we're different colleges are implementing different promise programs that I think that has also helped us encourage students to eliminate debt. I know here at college, for the last couple of years, we have been specifically talking students out of debt by telling them that we have a promise program available.
Know that. I'm glad that you brought that up. You're right. There's a lot of different programs out there that that your institutions have implemented that definitely does change how students can pay for their cost of education. So thank you. Well, if any of you guys have anything additional that you want to add or think about later, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to provide this to my leadership who wanted to kind of engage what is happening at the school so they had a better understanding. So I greatly appreciate all of you providing your feedback. So thank you so much.
Thank you, DeChà. We're going to move on to our next topic. Creating a succession plan. Rochelle is going to talk to us a little bit about that and what it means in your offices.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but over the last year and a half, I've lost 3 employees to retirement. I was only able to, or I'm only going to be able to rehire for one of those positions. So staff shortage there immediately, but I have 3 potential employees that could be at the age of retiring or considering retiring over the next, say, 3 to 5 years. So that gives me pause as to how I'm going to continue to run my office successfully. Remaining compliant. We know how difficult it is for financial aid offices to remain compliant with everything that we have going on. Not to mention 2 years ago in 2020 with the pandemic starting and everything else that was layered on top of our offices. I know that some of my staff is also leaving for, outside positions or could be leaving for outside positions, not in the financial aid world. So I'm really concerned or really just want to reach out and see what other offices are doing as far as a succession plan. How are you going to maintain that level of knowledge, that has left or potentially will be leaving your office? I think we counted 60 years of knowledge left within a year time frame. So that's a big amount of information that I don't have access to anymore. So how are your offices handling that? How's your campus handling that as a whole? Maybe not even in a financial aid office, but across campuses. Do you have programs in place? Do you have leadership trainings? I'm just looking for what anybody might have available. And silence is not good.
I will just say it's something I hadn't thought about recently. So, because I do pretty much everything.
Yes.
When you have small campuses, you do everything.
Robert, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, so we have done, we have a lot of turnover here also. So what we have done is our instructional design people have actually, when the folks let us know that they're going to retire, they go over there and actually videotape them doing their work, so we can document, their knowledge.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. Bridgette, I think you were next.
We have a new president and lots of initiatives. And one of the initiatives and one of the work groups is for succession planning. So it is something that I think is now high on the list at the university to have a department, probably under HR, that's succession planning and talent management, I think is what it's going to be called. And in our office, we are very fortunate to have a person that helps train our staff. And she came up with these master training plan documents a while back. And it's been really helpful for each individual writes down all their tasks. And then, so when she's training and she's, say, training a new advisor, she knows like these are the critical tasks they have to know. But it's been helpful for me, for other staff members, that I'm like, if they, if they left or retire or whatever, I say, go look at their master training plan or task list and see exactly what all they did to make sure we're not missing anything. And I mean, there's always something we're missing, but it helps to remember, okay, that person did this report and this project and sat on this committee and went to these meetings. And then we also do job aids. So when we have slower time, which isn't very often, but we have our staff do job aids where they write out, kind of like what Robert was saying, where it's kind of what they do. Videos would be great, but they write it all out with screenshots. And then we try to have other people look at those job aids, because always it's, well, I wrote all this down, but I forgot this piece, or no, I don't do it that way. I do it this way, so we do try to have job aids for all of our tasks.
Thank you.
Arna, I saw your hand up earlier. Did you want to also make a comment?
Yes, Rochelle, you bring a very, very good topic, and you're catching me at a weak point because there's a salad with my name on it right next to me. But let me just say that I'm glad that you brought this topic up of succession plan, and because we, the workforce right now is very fluid. There's a lot of movement, and there's a movement in this country with the Great Recession, the Great Resignation, or the I Quit movement. And it's not just people getting ready for retirement, but just a total re-examination of our lives and what priorities we have in life. I too have vacancies to fill, and I lost some to the corporate sector that paid a whole lot of money versus minimum wage Arnold here, but then I also lost some very good employees that had been with me or with the institution for 15, 20 years, and they have to take care of an elderly parent. They have to homeschool their kids. I mean, the cost of daycare, having a daughter that has a 1-year-old, oh my gosh, for me to pay that type of daycare expenses. But nonetheless, there's a lot of problems in terms of turnover, and it's not just financial aid in my institution. I talk to my fiscal folks. I talk to my auditors. Now, I'm not supporting more auditors, but it's kind of good to know. But anyway, so it's across the spectrum. How am I reacting or approaching to it? Well, the thing is that we there's a couple of issues. One is retention, right, Rochelle and colleagues? How do we retain our precious staff that's skilled in our profession? Because we can't hire just a person off the street and make them a financial aid professional. We all know that. So how do we retain, but how do we recruit also? So what I've done is engage our human resource office to do a market analysis of all our salaries in the financial aid office, and how competitive are we within our market. Also, so it's interesting to know how below market we are. So that gives you a very good analysis of very objective. It's not Rochelle, it's not Arnold, it's not Bridgette, it's not us, the financial aid directors, complaining. It's a reality. So I would advise you get some of that data. Also, in the interim, I had the opportunity of an employee that left us and wanted to be a at-home mom, and I get it. But I hired her part-time to work for me. And in that part-time employment, her skill set is so advanced that I can get, don't tell her this, but I can get 30 hours of output, because she's knowledgeable enough. So also looking at hiring a bunch of temps. Right now I have a workforce of 8 temps. And yes, the turnover is there, but I typically try to have a workforce. Engage work studies, have more work studies and support them. But I really had to concentrate on the salaries and bump those salaries to a competitive level. Otherwise, you can't retain and you cannot recruit. So you hit a little sensitive nerve, I think, in all of us. And I think that we often talk about a lot, which is rightfully so, is information dissemination of our financial aid programs. We talk about funding, but you have brought into the discussion the issue of capacity and capacity building, and how do we train the next generation? Because someday Arnold's going to hang up those spurs, and I would like to leave. Now I'm into legacy building. I'd like to leave it in very nice, careful hands of somebody that succeeding me in running a major critical affordability office to our students and parents out there. So again, with that, thank you so much for bringing the discussion, and I'll stop talking, Denise, before you chat me on the side.
Well, thank you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, Denise. I just, again, I'm struggling here, as we all are. So I just wanted a little piece of advice, anything I can take with me. So and just Arnold, just so you know, we did engage. We do actually have the complete salary survey we completed about a year ago. We're just getting the results now. So that will be something that I'll be looking at in the future. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Well, and it's so hard. I know Rochelle and I we're 30 minutes apart. And so our pool of applicants is very small. And so it's in our little corner of the world, I can count on my hand probably 5 to 10 higher education institutions, and within a 100-mile radius. So it's like we're all vying for the same people, and that makes it really, really difficult. And to bring somebody new in, you're talking about you have to train them, and it takes a smooth running year to go through the financial aid cycle. And then you get that person trained, and then they go work at admissions for double the pay, or they go work at another school. And then you're left to start over again. So definitely, and then you have the issue with the workforce. I mean, the workforce is very limited right now. So we can all commiserate together. Okay, any more comments about succession planning? Thank you so much, Rochelle, for bringing up that very, very good topic. We had gathered several topics last meeting for topics of discussion that you guys want to see us pursue. I know we're going to pursue several of them next June meeting. So now we're looking for topics for potentially our September meeting. I think it's in September. Is that right, DeChà?
Yes, we have September and then one in December. So there are additional topics.
Yeah, additional topics that you guys can think about that you'd like to see us discuss. I'm open at this point for suggestions, and I see Bridgette?
One thing we've already started to look at is the Student Aid Index. TASFA has a tool out there, so we're starting to run data on our students and how that's going to affect our students. So I just wanted to bring up if we could maybe have a summary of what y'all are doing at the Cord Board for state aid programs, just in general regarding all the FAFSA changes. I mean, I know you'll try to mirror a lot of what the FAFSA does, but just kind of what planning you're doing with the Student Aid Index and changes with the FAFSA.
Awesome.
Jotted that down. Thanks, Bridgette.
Any other topic suggestions? Some of the things we talked about last time, we talked about demographic trends of the state, what happens when the emergency funding ends. I don't think it's gonna, I'm kidding. The SAI from the state perspective. So we've talked about several of those topics to bring forward for the next meeting. So hopefully we'll have some things for you at our next meeting under topics of discussion and presentations. Okay. Any other feedback from today's meeting? Anybody have anything they need to add? Any questions they'd like to ask that didn't get asked earlier? I do want to, while we're waiting on that, to make sure everyone please complete the expense report. Of course, right now we're just dealing with time because, of course, it's virtual. So please, that is a requirement for all of us. Please complete that and submit it to Jody as soon as possible. She just sent a link out to your email. It shouldn't take you very long, and get those submitted so that she can have those already rounded up for her reporting. Anything else we need to talk about? Thank you guys so much for your attention and your engagement today. Appreciate every one of you, and we look forward to our next meeting. And I'm going to adjourn you. Let me put the record straight. Almost 12 minutes or 13 minutes early, so we can go have lunch. Like Arnold said, he's got a salad waiting on him. Me too.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.